General? Would you care to step outside?
Superman!
Superman, thank God. I mean, get him! Come to me, son of Jor-El! Kneel before Zod!
Hello and welcome to Comic Book Movie Oblivion, the podcast about feature films based on comic books and comic strips that people have stopped talking about. We are your hosts, Jordan and Kumar, that's me.
Kneel before Jord.
And this week we're talking about Superman 2. I didn't expect to be doing another movie in this series so quickly, but we had two deaths in like 3-4 weeks apart.
Yeah.
So here we are.
And that's how we like to do things here on this podcast.
That's right.
We're very morbid.
That's right, absolutely.
So the mysterious death of Gene Hackman.
Yeah.
Last week.
But he was 95.
Yes,
The death of his wife is more...
That's right. The mystery...
And the dog.
The mystery surrounds the dog and the wife, isn't it? I mean, I'm not sure a 95-year-old can die mysteriously. But certainly the circumstances surrounding it.
Yeah.
So far we haven't really heard much. We may never know.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so for this issue, this episode basically chose two issues. The first is Adventure Comics number 283 from April 1961. This is the first appearance of the Phantom Zone.
Yes.
And of Zod. And in a flashback, he doesn't actually appear in Earth. This issue was written by Robert Bernstein and drawn by George Papp. They're not writers I know very well. Adventure Comics was a Superboy series, basically. It was called Adventure, but it had, I think, a Legion of Superheroes showed up in there as well, because that was a kind of Superboy spin-off in a way. Anyway, that's not that important. What is important, I think, even before we talk about the issue, is that Zod was a really minor character.
Yes.
Throughout, until Superman 1, and especially Superman 2, he was like the Khan that showed up in Star Trek 2, Wrath of Khan. It's like, who's this guy?
Yes.
They just chose the most minor character to throw in there.
Yes.
Effectively. He only, as I mentioned, he only showed up a few times, really.
And yet, what a shadow he's cast.
Yes. After the movie came out,
Yes.
everybody started using him. But he was really a Superboy villain. He didn't show up much in the early days. He didn't show up much in the Superman days. He was a Superboy villain. And actually there was a guy named Jax a Phantom Zone villain named Jax and he showed up more often than Zod. He was more of the schemer. Zod, when he showed up, would actually dress like a general, military. Yeah. He looked like Khmer Rouge or something. Like he had the...
He was like a generalissimo.
Exactly,
like
yes.
an Argentinian warlord.
Yes, exactly. The other character that did show up later on was Feyaro. We'll talk about her when we talk about the next issue. But in 283, what happens is basically we start with Superboy Clark Kent, working in his dad's general store.
Who is secretly Superboy.
He is secretly Superboy.
We
it
know
might
this
be your
because
first
there's
issue.
a caption.
It really might be your first issue.
But every issue is like
every issue they tell you, because you never know. And actually, this trend of reminding you of everything that's going on kind of disappeared for all in the 60s and then came back in the 70s, or in the 80s especially. Once Jim Shooter came on, he's like, every issue could be somebody's first issue, so we got to make sure everybody knows what's going on all the time.
But
so yes, we are reminded.
This is classic kind of Silver Age Superman, where it's absolutely holding your hand in every panel.
Yep.
Because the writers have no respect.
Yes. Yes. So we start with a feat, which is typical of all Superman and Superboy stories in this era. And this one, it's him churning butter out of milk in instants.
Yeah.
That's just it's like the cold open of every story has something. In the 70s and 80s, Superman would always be fighting something out in space. He would be fighting some bizarre energy field and then come back to Earth. And that would have nothing to do with the rest of the story.
Yeah. Well, here it's because the cow gave a little more milk than they were expecting. So
the delivery man, left twice as much.
So Superboy makes some super butter.
And he forgot the butter. He delivered double the milk and forgot the butter. So Superboy's like, I'll make the butter. Doesn't have anything to do with the rest of the story.
It's the dumbest thing. But then we get more, because then he's trying out a new electric typewriter.
Yeah. The first one on the market.
Yeah. And we get a lengthy digression where Lana Lang comes in and starts hypothesizing about an electric typewriter that could respond to brainwaves.
Right.
Because she says, electric typewriter uses electric signals from pressing the keys. Because Superboy's explained it to her, Clark Kent. This is relevant, I promise. Yeah. Clark Kent has explained it to her. He said, I don't have to mash the keys like you have to with a typewriter. Because it doesn't operate on, you don't have to press the ink into the page. Instead, it sends an electric signal, so you only have to press them gently. To which Lana Lang replies...
But he says, hang on, I just want to interrupt for a second.
Oh, please.
He says it has terrific speed and sensitivity. Everything's done by electricity except the brain work. After all, one must do something for oneself. Which reminded me of the adage, thou shalt not make a machine in the likeness of human mind. Right there. Fantastic. There's a message for 2025 as well.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
So, and then Lana Lang then starts talking about, you know what else is electrical signals? Brainwaves. Yeah. So, in theory, you could have a electric typewriter that just responds to brainwaves. You wouldn't even have to use your fingers. And then she goes, but brainwaves are very faint. So, it would require some kind of super brain making super brainwaves. And Clark Kent is like, oh no! Has Lana Lang figured out my secret identity?
I also want to point out that in this era of Superman and Superboy stories, usually Chekhov's typewriter is right there in the physical page. It's usually pretty obvious that it's going to come back to solve, especially since they've told us on the cover of this issue and the first page that he turns into a phantom that can't interact with anything.
I must admit, I just thought, what the fuck is going on here? I was less savvy than you were about about what was happening. I just thought, what is this?
Yeah.
And I thought, it's just a sort of like a cheap thing where Lana's going to figure...
But also, as you pointed out, why does he suspect that she knows he's Superboy based on her hypothesizing that Superboy could use his typewriter with his mental powers? What's the connection? Why is he worried?
Nothing... Yeah, exactly. Because nothing is more important in these episodes at this point than keeping his secret identity.
I get that, but what's the connection between her? She's going, hey, I bet Superboy could work this typewriter with his brain. He's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Well, I don't understand why he thinks that she's made that connection, which she hasn't, of course.
Well, she hasn't.
No. He says Gollum for a second. I thought she discovered I was Superboy.
Nothing's more dangerous than the idea that his secret identity can be revealed, and which is hilarious because there's absolutely no stakes.
Yeah.
This whole thing with the secret identity is just ephemera.
Yes.
Like, if people found out he was Superboy, these comics always, and the films, and Superman always treats it like it would be the end of the world.
You know what? There's something 100 times worse than this in the Zack Snyder Superman movie.
Oh yeah.
When he won't save his father.
What? Yeah,
because it might give away his... And he doesn't have a secret identity at that stage. He just has powers. And he's like, I can't give it away.
That is rightly mocked.
Yeah.
Where it is...
And that's much worse than this business with the typewriter.
Everywhere. That ridiculous thing with Kevin Costner not letting him save him.
Yeah. Okay, meanwhile, Lana's dad is out in New Mexico. He's a scientist. And they're on some sort of archaeological dig. But while they're out there, suddenly this steel box falls out of the sky.
Yeah. It's made of an alien metal.
Alien metal. It's got alien writing. Like, we don't know what this is. Let's take it back to Smallville. Maybe...
And it's also lead lined. So not only is it made of an alien metal, but it's lead lined as well.
Yeah.
So Superboy can't see into it.
Yeah. But they take it to Superboy. They're like, maybe Superboy can figure it out. Superboy's like, I can't open it. Or I can't see inside. It's lead. He's like, okay, but it might be dangerous. So he recognizes the writing of Kryptonian. And he takes...
Kryptonese, actually, is
Kryptonese. Why? I don't understand why it's Asian.
Well, it's just a different...
What is the etymology of Ian versus Ease? I meant to look this up and I didn't.
I didn't either.
But we've got Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, and then... Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. So it's Kryptonese, yes.
Portuguese. No, it's just a... the root's probably Greek or something like that.
But I do want to point out that he says that the box, according to the description, the box was fired into space 20 years ago, long before Krypton blew up. It probably remained in orbit until some disturbance in outer space, possibly cosmic debris, forced it out of orbit, and it floated down Earth. I would say, why was this thing in orbit around the Earth instead? Like, it was where... But
But
this is very close to Superman 2.
There's a pipeline between Krypton
Yes,
and Earth.
this is very similar to the Phantom Zone.
There always has been.
Mirror.
That's why
being
there's so much
right
kryptonite
outside
everywhere.
right by the moon.
Yeah.
It's right there, and it gets knocked out of orbit. By this space debris, I guess, in a sense. Anyway, so he takes it out to the desert where he's going to open it, and he opens it with his heat vision. I think he burns the top off of it.
Yep.
And inside there's a scroll which explains that these are like super dangerous weapons that we built in Krypton, and they were so dangerous we decided we can't keep them. We gotta put them in a box and send them to space. I don't know why they didn't disassemble or destroy them. I think we had this plot line before in one of these Silver Age comics where they just didn't destroy the thing. They're like, well, let's just set that aside somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sure we have. Because these comics
really familiar.
just don't care.
Yeah. So one of these things is a laser that can destroy a mountain.
It uses electroatomic evaporation.
Yes. Yes. Oh, sorry, it's an evaporator then. It's
Three
not a
different scientific terms there.
mashed together. If this comic had come out today, it would include quantum.
Quantum, absolutely.
Quantum
Or maybe nano.
Nano quantum. It's a nano quantum beam that destroys this mountain. The other thing is an enlarger array.
Also, luckily though, the mountain is one that road workers are trying to
Every
demolish.
Superman story, whenever he has to destroy something, it's like, this is planned for destruction anyway. So I'll help these guys out by digging this tunnel for them through the mountain. There's always some thought balloon explaining that it's okay for me to be doing this.
To be destroying this, yeah. It's so saccharine.
And the next thing is an enlarge array. This is going to cause continuity problems later on because it enlarges this tree. Yeah, and then he buries it at the bottom of the ocean. He never uses it to bring Kandor back to full size.
That was
dumb.
dumb.
It was always sitting there at the bottom of the ocean. If he'd only was able to remember that thing that he'd buried in his youth. Anyway, there's some antics with a lizard that turns to the size of a dinosaur.
Which he then refers to as a dinosaur.
Yes.
Afterwards.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
Even though it's not a dinosaur, it's just a giant lizard.
No. Later he sees another lizard and he says that was that lizard's mate. I'm like, how'd you know?
Do lizards mate? Well, obviously they do. But do they pair up?
I don't know. They're life partners? Weird. Very weird.
So odd.
Anyway, the last thing he finds is this Phantom Zone ray projector. And he has to get the details of this from this helmet that he puts on. I'm not sure why this was the case.
Why?
But basically,
so you can have it in narrative captions.
He learns about it, and he learns that it was the way that the Kryptonians imprisoned their criminals. Was they turned them into these kind of phantoms. They phased them out, so they can see, they can observe our world, but they can't interact with it.
So these people are in the Phantom Zone, but it's not so much a place as it is a state.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. You are wandering around like a ghost.
Yes.
Intangible.
Yeah.
You can't be seen or heard or interacted with in any way.
Yeah, it's miserable. You can only interact with other people that are in the Phantom
state. We don't know that at this point. We just know in this story...
That's right. And I don't even know if in this story we learn... By the way, the scroll in the box was from his father, Jor-El. He has almost no emotional reaction to this. He's not like... he's not teary about reading a message from his dad.
It's from my father. He must get messages from Jor-El constantly.
I guess so. But and I don't know if it's mentioned here that Jor-El created the zone.
Yes,
or discovered or built the projector.
He built the projector.
Okay.
And invented this method of punishing criminals.
Right. Okay.
So there are two buttons. There's a black button to send people into the zone or the state. And then there's a white one to bring them back.
Yeah. But basically
that you get sentenced to the Phantom Zone for like 20 years. And then you have to, 20 years later, you have to remember to go and stand
You have to go stand where you were zapped at. You have to go stand in front of the projector again. It's like a firing squad kind of situation.
You would go mad. There's no way you would end up back in front of that projector 20 years later.
Yeah.
You would be a gibbering lunatic.
Yeah.
After 20 years of never eating, speaking, or... This is awful. This is just horrible.
Yeah. So now we meet General Zod. General Zod had...
The thing is, we've seen the Phantom... Sorry, we do meet General Zod, but we've seen the Phantom Zone. We saw it when we did Supergirl.
Yeah.
There, it's not a state. It's very definitely a place.
But in Superman 1 and in Superman 2, it seems to be a state because they're banging on the glass.
Yes. They get imprisoned by the album cover I've seen it called.
Yes. Okay, so now we meet Zod. Zod was a criminal. He was a general who had he created this army of bizarro Zods, effectively.
This is so weird.
Very weird. Sometimes Superman comics, again, of this era, they loved coincidences. Like, Superman would do a simulation of what his life would have been like if he had stayed on Krypton, and he would have married some woman named Lara Laurel or something. He's like, and he would think 2 L's. Just like Lois Lane and Lana Lang. What a coincidence.
So here the coincidence is that Zod made robots that look exactly like Bizarro.
Yes, imperfect duplicates. It looked exactly like Bizarros. He tried to overthrow the government, and he also wanted to enslave all of the people of Krypton. These were his 2 goals.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And he does swear someday I'll enslave all of its people before he's...
And that's it. We don't see him anymore. Presumably he's still in the Phantom Zone. In fact, I think Superboy says... he must still be... all these criminals must still be in the Phantom Zone because the projector's here.
Yes, that's right.
So let's unpack this for a moment. Jor-El invented a method of punishing criminals, punished a bunch of criminals with it, then decided it was too dangerous to keep around, and sent it into space while they were all still imprisoned in it.
Yeah, so they'd be... for eternity. He was never going to bring them back.
That's fucking awful.
That is really bad. Very bad, Jor-El.
He's a bad man.
So meanwhile, the lizard's mate accidentally clicks the black button on the Phantom Zone projector while Superboy is staying in front of it, and he is zapped into the zone. Now we have a series of... the whole point of this story is that Superboy is a phantom, so crimes are happening, but he can't stop them.
Can't stop them.
Yeah. So this is probably...
his secret identity might be revealed, which of course is much, much worse than a crime. His parents send out one of the Superboy robots.
Yes.
Remember he's got a robot?
Yeah,
you remember.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about these robots before. But it's one that is not quite working right.
Yeah.
So Superboy's not confident that it can impersonate him.
Yeah.
And sure enough, it tries to lift up a car.
Yeah.
Which it's capable of doing because it can impersonate both Clark Kent and
It's really interesting that is it a Clark... does he have 2 types of robots, Clark robots and Superboy robots, or does he
He's got
just
one
have
type.
one type?
He's got one type.
That goes around in disguise.
Yeah,
Okay.
because this robot has super strength.
Yeah.
But is malfunctioning, so it doesn't know that it's supposed to hide it when it's pretending to be Clark Kent.
It seems to me he should have built 2 robots, a Clark robot and a Superboy robot.
That would make
make
sense.
the Clark have no super strength.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah.
I guess you're a lot smarter than Superboy.
Maybe he could only afford to build one.
So he's...
Yeah.
This is far worse than the jewelry thieves. Now he's... oh no, his secret identity might be revealed.
Yes. Yes.
Although, it's more likely that people would find out there's some kind of crazy-ass robot running around that thinks it's Superman and is as strong as Superman.
But it looks like Clark Kent, so... I don't know.
Yeah, whatever. And he manages to make it stop by thinking at it really hard.
Yes, he uses his brainwaves to short-circuit the superpower elements of it. So it's still able to function as a normal Clark robot without raising suspicion.
Yeah. So, and then he gets the idea about how he's going to escape. He remembers Lana's lecture from the start that an electric typewriter could conceivably run off sufficiently powerful brainwaves. So he's still producing, even though he's in the Phantom Zone, whatever. There's not even any point trying to unpack how this would work. He can think at things still. Even though he can't touch them speak to them.
That's right.
He can't use his heat vision.
It reminded me
brainwaves can still be detected.
That Star Trek episode with...
Are we going to start ringing the bell for Star Trek?
We got to find some sound effect.
It's called The Next Phase.
Yes.
I remember it well.
Because Roe and LaForge have been phased out. But they're still walking around on the floors.
Yeah, and they can breathe.
Yes.
I mean, Superboy doesn't need to breathe, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, they don't... The ship's in motion, and yet... would have been left behind.
Yeah. Yeah, all sorts of stuff like that.
Floated
so here
to
we
the
got
floor.
Superboy. He can't interact, but somehow his brainwaves can go from phantom state into the normal state.
The comic treats it like it would be common sense, but if you're in another state, in the phantom state, there's no reason why your brainwaves would be able to leave that state. When nothing else you can do does. But whatever, we just have to accept it. He activates the typewriter and sends a message to Clark Kent to go out and press the white button. When he stands in front of it, he comes back.
He comes back, and then he buries all that stuff at the bottom of the ocean. I will say also another thing about this era was, this is when Mort Weisinger was editor, a notorious editor, he would come up with the covers first. And then we'd hand the covers to writers and say, come up with a story around this. So they would have to work backwards, and there were already plot holes in the covers, effectively, or very difficult, complicated plots in the covers.
Yeah.
And
So
they
the
would have
cover
to
for this
try
one-
to come up with something in 8 to 12 pages. This one's 14.
I
but-
completely believe it, because the cover has a Phantom Superboy looking at the robot lifting a car.
That's page 1. The cover is him out in the desert, where Ma and Pa are like, where's Superboy? And he's like trying to touch them, and his hand's like passing through them.
Damn. Okay.
And he's like, how can I? He says, I've been projected into the Phantom Zone. They don't see me. So the writer would have been like, okay, what's this Phantom Zone thing? I got to come up with it. All this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, yeah, that's that.
Yeah.
First appearance of Zod.
Yes. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about Feora. So, Feora came in 1977, so now we've had a few Phantom Zone stories by this point. A lot more established continuity, which in Superman terms means objects, or things that recurring story elements like this bottled city of Kandor, etc. Now, I was curious about the introduction of Feora in 1977. I wondered if they had seen the script for the first movie and saw a female Phantom Zone criminal and were like, we need to add one, or if it was just a coincidence, or in 70, as the script was being written, Puzo and whoever else was writing it was like, just saw this very new character, like, okay, we'll just throw that in there, because you're just thrown in that opening scene. By the way, only Zod is the only official Phantom Zone villain in the movie, because Non is not the non-speaking brute, is not a character that ever appeared in the comics. The equivalent would be Jax who is kind of the brains behind them all.
Okay.
And Ursa, who would be Feora but has a different name, but is essentially has the same kind of similar vibes in some way.
Very much so.
But I do wonder if this was a straight. I mean, even Jimmy Olsen was a character that was created for like the radio show or the TV show, not the comics, and came in later. And I'm wondering if there's a similar synergy happening here.
I don't know, and I didn't. I'm sure it's documented, because there are quite a few books and documentaries about the two Superman movies, about Superman 79 and Superman 2. I just didn't have time to read them or watch them. Mm-hmm. My instinct would be, they do seem similar, don't they? But then why not just call her Feora instead of renaming her Ursa? So it might be coincidence. Evil female characters tend to be icy, and unpleasant, because of course we consider that to be kind of like the opposite of the female virtues of being nurturing and caring, and so it probably and Ursa is not as big a man hater as Feora is, because Feora's defining characteristic is that she's a man hater.
Yes, we learned that she had a concentration camp. She set up a concentration camp, throw men in there, and she killed 23 men and was sentenced to 300 years in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah. So her deal is that she just loathes men. So and that's not something that Ursa says or does.
Right.
She just is just generally evil. So I would say it's probably a coincidence.
Right.
That's my instinct. But I look forward to being corrected by anyone listening who's more of an expert on these films than I am.
So she was introduced around Action 471 in 1977. There's a 3-part storyline. We read the 3rd issue of these. But basically she, through her hyper brainwaves, is able to get out of the Phantom Zone.
She tricks some pensioner into letting her out.
Yeah, this widower. She poses as a ghost, the ghost of his wife.
Yeah.
She's able to semi-project herself out into the world.
She uses her brainwaves, She's a psychic.
Yeah.
But also there's precedent for people using brainwaves to escape from the Phantom Zone, because that's exactly how Superboy got out, so I don't have a problem.
Sort of, yes. This is also the WGBS era of Superman. So this is the era when Clark became a news anchor. The Daily Planet was bought out by this television network called WGBS. Steve Lombard became a regular character. He was a sports reporter for WGBS, and he was this dumb jock that would always try to trip up Clark, and Clark would use his powers to secretly make a fool of Steve. And this one, he's being really like a male chauvinist and saying there's no way Feora could beat Superman. She's like a weak woman.
Right.
As always, DC is usually about 10 years behind on like social issues like feminism and things like this. So we have to deal with all this stuff in 77 with Steve Lombard. But we learned the Superman had been defeated in the previous issue, which was 472, when Feyre used a special martial arts move.
Well, she's more than a match for him because she is, she's proficient in martial arts, whereas Superman's not. He's so strong that he's never learned to fight.
Right. Yes.
Whereas
that actually does kind of come up. Like, he's like, I've been working out, like, I have conditioning, and you've been in the Phantom Zone, and you're just fat and flabby, he says to some of the other escapees.
Yeah. So on the one hand, it's interesting, actually. I kind of like that. On the one hand, Feyre is more than a match for him because she knows how to use Kryptonian martial arts. Although not the same Kryptonian martial arts that Lois Lane has learned.
That's right.
I read that panel and I thought, well, there we go.
Yes.
But then later on, it turns out that Superman is more resistant to Feyre's psychic assaults than regular Kryptonians because he's been bathing in yellow sunlight for so much longer than them. So he's tougher. And I think he even flexes when he says this.
Yes. I do like that we learned that after she defeated him, he ran away. And he actually... We learned in this issue he projected himself into the Phantom Zone because he's got some plan.
Yeah.
But him flying away, immediately I was like, oh, that's like Superman too.
Yeah.
Like he's kind of defeated and then he flies up to the fortress.
Yes.
So that kind of made sense to me in a way.
Very good. Yeah, we'll come back to that. So his plan is ridiculously convoluted.
Yes. Feyre has released all the criminals and she's projecting all the humans on Earth into the zone. She's swapping them around completely. Yeah. I'm not sure why. What about your slave race? Wouldn't you leave the humans out there?
And she's enlarged. The Kandorians, I think, are involved in some way as well.
Yes, because I couldn't quite figure this out because they have a Phantom Zone projector because they're still using that criminal justice system. They're still
this horrific criminal justice system.
They're still sending people into the zone.
So Kandor, for those who don't know, Kandor is a city that was miniaturized by Brainiac.
Yeah.
Before Krypton exploded, and Superman rescues it from Brainiac, and it's kind of an ongoing project
for decades. He's trying to figure out how to enlarge them and what to do with them once they're enlarged.
And he's never, even though he had an enlarging ray, he never figures it out.
Well, he forgot. He forgot he had that enlarging ray when he was Superboy. So all that like Lombard, Jimmy, Lois are all projected into the Phantom Zone. They're ghosts. Meanwhile, the Phantom Zone villains are like destroying a statue of Superman, which I like because they destroy Mount Rushmore
in the film.
I was like, okay, So I couldn't figure out what was going on with Kandor, but Feyre shows up at the fortress, destroys a projector.
Yeah.
Superman robot attacks her.
And we get a line about how the Superman robot is seldomly seen these days because it's sensitive to pollution.
Yes.
Which you mentioned. You mentioned ages ago when we were talking about, oh my god, I think it was when we were doing Telugu Superman.
Okay.
So I was so pleased. Because they never, as you said, never resisted a chance to explain something. It's like, remember these robots? Well, there's a reason why he doesn't use them anymore. It can only be in Antarctica or wherever the Fortress of Solitude is. It's because they're very sensitive to pollution.
Yes, I don't even remember that, but again, this is a thing where it's 1977 and now it's like, oh, there's like pollution.
We now care about pollution.
We care about pollution and we care about the women's rights movement, etc., etc. Okay, Supergirl and like Batman and Green Lantern show up. They're
in the Phantom Zone too.
Superman had been in the zone. I don't quite get this, but he is in disguise and released along with everyone else.
He put himself in the zone, so
that when
and then he pretended to be a
criminal,
a Phantom Zone criminal.
It's really funny because he's got this
a fake beard.
Because the others are like, "Who's that guy with the mustache?" They literally say. That over there, that one there with the mustache. I noticed him in the zone.
Yeah, and
Who is that guy?
Unlike the electric typewriter bit, I knew straight away what was going on here. Yeah. There is absolutely no mystery whatsoever. It is plainly Superman, except his plan makes no sense. His plan was to get turned back into the regular world along with all the criminals.
Yeah, so he would be in the physical world with everyone else.
But he was already in the physical world.
Yes, but he would have been projected into the Phantom Zone along with like the rest of everybody else on Earth.
Oh, I see. So it's to stop
It's to prevent
It's
himself
to stop
from getting...
her from putting him
So
in
he
the
gets
Phantom Zone.
so he gets put out instead of being put in when she... I don't know how she put everybody
when
in.
she does the big swap.
Yeah.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
That makes sense, actually.
But when he rips out of his disguise, the clothes even rip off of him. I don't know, why couldn't you just do this business in those clothes? You don't need to wear your Superman outfit. Okay,
Wouldn't
but...
it be better to not reveal yourself as Superman so that there's some mystery about... You wouldn't immediately attract the ire of all the Phantom Zone
Yeah,
criminals?
or even... But my point is, even when you reveal yourself, you don't need to change your clothes.
No. You don't... Yeah.
Anyway, he fights them all at the same time. I like this, because they're like trying to hold him down, and he's fighting them off. It's very... all
Superman
kinds of stuff's
2,
in
baby!
Superman 2. Then finally he just kind of... How does he trick her into... He knew about her device because her psychic thoughts have become so strong that he knows what she's thinking all the time.
Yeah,
She's projecting unconsciously.
So she smashes the Phantom Zone projector that Superman has, but she has her own device that she's built or that she tricked that pensioner into building for her.
Yeah.
And it swaps the states of people in the Phantom Zone with people in the real world, and that's how everyone was sent en masse. All the Earthlings were sent en masse to the Phantom Zone, and all the Phantom Zone's criminals were sent en masse into the real world. But Superman knows everything because she's unwittingly broadcasting all her plans psychically.
Yeah.
She had to train herself to project her thoughts so strongly when she was in the zone in order to trick that old man into doing what she wanted that she's not able to turn it off anymore. She's like a compulsive broadcaster now. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. But he's figured this out, and he switches the machine around somehow, and she's projected back. Oh, and he also sends that man, because that man was so miserable, the widower, was so miserable in his life. And he believed his wife was alive. He still was like, he's got like
dementia or something. So, yes, he's senile. So nothing would make him happier than to be sent in the zone.
Than to be in the zone with Feora, which will drive her nuts, and he'll be happy. Very strange ending, but kind of hilarious, and I loved it.
Yeah, it was funny. Very unusual for these... Very kind of like funny and ironic.
Yes.
In a way that these Superman stories never are, because they're also earnest.
Yes, but the backup stories would... Anything with Steve Lombard where they're pranking each other would have a bit of humor.
Okay, I can only compare it to the 60s one we've read, where they're all deadly earnest and ridiculous.
I will point out this was written by Cary Bates and drawn by Curt Swan. Curt Swan was absolutely one of my favorite Superman artists. And this was kind of typical of Bates' era. I don't think they were forcing the covers on them at this stage. And the issues usually about the full length most of the time, or there might be an 8-page backup or something like that. But I think that basically establishes all we need to about the zone and the kind of people there and how they get in and out and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Zod appears in this one too, but he has a minor role.
Again, he was a minor character. He was much like Khan or like Blade. It was not like a really...
Blade,
even less so than Blade. It was just like a...
He's just in the background.
Yeah, yeah. And he's not even the planner most of the time. It's like Jaxer is the schemer.
Yeah. Or Farrah in this case.
Yes, that's right.
He's taking orders from Farrah.
That's right. She's like, I'm going to kick those guys' asses. Like, she has her own secret plan to be Empress, right?
Yeah.
When she comes back. And then it's slightly thwarted because Superman appears. Okay, so let's get to the movie, I think, if we're ready. So I did want to mention that when we talked about Superman 1, I mistakenly claimed that it was Gene Hackman's first comedic role. But of course, after all the talk this week, of course Young Frankenstein was like 5 years before that. So it was maybe like second, or maybe it was a little bit, some slightly comedic stuff in there.
Okay.
But it opens with on Krypton.
Yes.
It opens with the criminals being captured.
Interestingly... this is in the... we probably won't talk too much about the Donna versus the Lester cut today, in case we want to revisit the Donna cut in a future episode, or even in a Patreon-only episode. Wink, wink. But this scene isn't in the Donna cut.
It's not.
No.
Okay.
And weirdly, I think it's so that we see the Phantom Zone criminals do actual crimes before they're sentenced to the zone.
Well, they do one crime. They walk up to a crystal control panel, they pick up a crystal, he breaks one, suddenly the lights go out, suddenly they're on trial, they go on trial and they're punished to Phantom Zone, as far as I can tell, within a span of 30 seconds. This is a very effective...
General Zod breaks a glow stick.
Yeah.
And for that, he's sentenced to endless torment
Well,
in an alternate
we do.
dimension.
The judges do say that he has a long string of crimes.
Yeah.
So this seems like it was a sting operation.
Right.
Like they're like, let's set up this crystal. He'll want to walk up and break it.
It's
And
just
when
so
he does,
dumb, though.
pow. And then very efficient justice system. It's like immediately trial, immediately sent
I
up
mean,
into
when you
space.
consider in the preceding film, we'd already seen this trial.
Yeah.
And we'd already heard that he was a kind of like megalomaniac.
In fact, it retcons the trial because
Yeah.
Jor-El was present at the trial
That's
in the
right.
first movie.
And he cast... Yeah, except also it doesn't, because all through the film, Zod is angry at Jor-El as his jailer.
Yes.
And yet Jor-El doesn't appear in this first
That's
scene
right.
in the second film. They really, really should have left this out, and I don't understand why it's in there. I can only think it's... So we remember who they are, first
Yeah.
off. And second of all, I think it... So that we see them do crime. Like, Non breaks a guy's neck.
Yes, that's right.
So Non commits murder,
Yeah.
although he may or may not be aware of his own actions.
Yes.
And the judges even say that. You know, you don't speak and you don't think, they say, basically, to him.
Right.
Anyway, and then General Zod breaks a glow stick, and for that, so they're definitely bad.
Well, yes.
They're not just political prisoners.
It is
They've
weird
done
that that's
bad
the one thing
things.
we see them do. They do talk in, like I said, the judges mention they have a list of crimes, whatever. This is the one. This is the one the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, it's a bit silly.
I thought I had a memory. I guess it was a false memory that this started with a shrunk version of a recap of the first movie, like in like a with the screen, like in a small version of the screen in the middle. Maybe that was a TV version. I don't know.
Might have been, because there are lots of edits.
Okay.
Because the Sulkines would send out different edits for different markets.
Yeah.
Like for the television market in one region and a different version for a different region.
Yeah.
And they would all have different footage.
Right. Okay.
Like footage that was cut from the theatrical release, they would include it in.
Okay.
So you may well have seen
Okay.
something like that.
So now we get the credits.
Right.
And we get recap of the first movie we are watching the credits.
It's really long.
It is pretty long, but I watched this with Ashman, and he appreciated it because he said he didn't really remember the first movie. Unlike
that's fair
me,
enough.
who has the first movie memorized from the first shot to the last, he's
Yes.
like, I couldn't quite remember
That's
it.
fair
so
enough,
it's good.
because the first movie is really long too, so...
Yes.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
But Gene Hackman is top billed.
Yeah.
And then, much like the first movie, like Christopher Reeve can't catch a break, I guess, until
Christopher
the
is
third one.
second build here.
Yeah.
Whereas he
Instead
was
of
third
third, yeah.
build in the first film. Yeah.
But the credits are in a very weird order. Like, everybody's like way down, like where you wouldn't expect them to be, and it's not. And I was like, is it alphabetical? It's not alphabetical.
Yep.
Terence Stamp is like way down on the list.
Yeah.
He should be second or third. Margot Kidder's way down there. She should be up there at 4, I would guess.
Yeah, it's strange. And there are some other strange things too. Again, we see that the story is by Mario Puzo again.
Yes, and the Newmans, what were their names? I can't remember, but those...
So, like we discussed when we did Superman, those... Mario Puzo wrote an unwieldy script. Enormous script of...
Yes, so this is the second half, effectively, or partially,
Yes.
of that they chopped in two.
But if you believe, Weitzman, that none of Mario Puzo's work made it into the eventual film, and they just like having his name attached.
Yeah.
Or they just contractually have to have his name kind of like headlining the film. Another thing is the composer has changed. John Williams is
Yes,
not the composer for
that's
this
right.
film, although
They've used his themes.
it does say that
They've built on his themes. There is a long credit in there for that of some
yes,
sort.
the composer says that composer is X, new guy, using themes written by John
Right.
Williams, which is an interesting credit.
Yeah.
You don't see things like that a lot.
No.
And, well, we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of coming back to stuff.
Yeah, well, let's get to director Richard Lester.
Let's just start now.
Yeah.
Okay. Come on. What happened?
Well, here's what I know.
Where's Donna gone?
Here's what I know from watching the DVD extras, which I own.
Yep.
Basically, for some reason, so they made these movies back to back. They were going to shoot Superman 1, Superman 2 at the same time. They had this giant script. It
was always going to be 2 movies, though, because of the Sulkine clause. We mentioned that.
Right.
So, in the early 70s, the Sulkines made two Three Musketeer movies.
Yeah.
And stiffed the actors.
Right, they paid them for one.
For one movie.
Yeah.
Who promptly then took them to court. And now there's in any Screen Actors Guild kind of contract, there's this clause that says you will be compensated for every movie that is released from the work you do.
Yes.
So because of that, from the start, there was always going to be 2 movies from this single script.
Okay.
Being shot at the same time.
Right. But they didn't have a good gimmick, I think as Donner called it, for the end of the first movie, for the climax. So they took... The time travel business was going to happen at the very end of number 2.
Yeah.
So they took that out and put it on the end of part 1. So part 2 didn't have an ending. They were going to have to come up with a new one.
Yeah. Well, first of all, yes, that's correct. But first of all, at some point during shooting, they decided, well, in around 1977, they decided that we need to finish the first film.
Yeah.
We can't shoot both films back to back. I think maybe they were running out of money.
Okay.
Because Warner Brothers did have to inject some extra money, about $15 million
Okay.
at one point. So it's not... You get different stories, but it seems like they decided they needed to get the first film out before finishing the second.
Okay.
So that's a decision made during the production of
Yeah.
Superman
Okay.
of both films.
Right.
They 75.
Right, so they're like, well, we'll leave the decision of how to end Superman 2 till later.
Yes. So when they switched, so about 75% of Superman 2 was shot when they made this decision.
Yeah.
To focus on Superman 1.
Yeah.
And then they took the ending of Superman 2 and put it in Superman 1,
Yeah.
as you said. So they have to come up with a new ending eventually
Yeah.
for Superman 2.
Yeah. By the way, speaking of that 15 million, when I was growing up, one of the books we had in my house was the Guinness Book of World Records 1982.
Yes.
And it had Superman 2 in there as the most expensive movie ever made at
Yes.
$50 million. And I used to love staring at this page because I had that picture of Superman fighting Zod on top of the car where they're standing on the roof of the car. And I would stare at that. Because we didn't have a VCR at the time, or we didn't have Superman 2. This is my dose. This is how I would get it in my veins. I would stare at the Guinness Book at this page.
Yeah. No,
and I loved that Superman was in the Guinness Book.
Yeah. It's interesting because this film, I think... Well, there's probably some Hollywood accounting going on, but the official figure for this movie is $54 million.
Okay.
$1 million less than Superman 1.
Okay.
Which was also the most expensive film ever made at that point.
Right.
However, who knows?
Okay.
Because these films are used so much, because these films were shot at the same time, and there's so much footage shared between them, and then there were so many reshoots, how do you even come up with a figure?
Yeah. So, at some stage, as far as I know from DVD extras, the Salkinds became unhappy with Richard Donner. I'm not sure why.
No.
Given the success of Part 1, what was their issue with him?
They'd already...
The cast loved him.
Yes.
They were all... And they fired him. They just decided to fire him, and they brought in this guy, Richard Lester, who I don't know much about.
This is great. Just like when we did Superman 79, we've started with production before talking about the film.
Yes.
We did that time as well. I can shed a little light on this.
Okay.
I did some research. Apparently, like the breakdown in relationships between the Salkinds and Donna, and also the other producer who had Pierre something. Okay. I'll come back to it. Bummer, it doesn't look like I've written his name down. Anyway, his first name's Pierre. Anyway, the relationship has broken down already.
Okay.
As early as 1977, the Salkinds and Donna are not on speaking terms.
Okay.
Everything has to go through an intermediary. Do you know who one of the intermediaries was?
Who?
Richard Lester.
Ah.
They brought him on during the shooting in 1977 to kind of act as an unofficial associate producer, an uncredited associate producer, and also in an unofficial capacity, just basically be the intermediary between them and him. So the film comes out, it's a massive success. Mm-hmm. But there's still stuff going on behind the scenes. So Marlon Brando, as we know, is unhappy with the amount of money he received. The colossal amount of money he received, which is more than $20 million for 2 weeks' work. Yeah. He took the Salkinds to court and won, and was awarded more money. Pierre Spengler.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Marlon Brando is awarded like $9 million more or something.
Whoa,
something ridiculous.
Okay.
Anyway, at this point, the Salkinds say, well, $15 million. He was awarded $15 million. In addition to like the more than $20 million he'd already been paid.
Okay.
Crazy. Because of this, the Salkinds cut him from Part 2.
Oh.
They just decide we're not going to have him in Part 2. We're not going through this again. So presumably partly to punish him for taking them to court, and partly because they owe him 11% of the gross of Superman 2.
It's interesting because they do use his face and voice in Part 5, Superman Lives. And I wonder what kind of contractual shenanigans Warner Brothers did to just, we'll just use this, we own it.
That's interesting because the whole reason we get the Donner cut is because they were able to get permission from Brando's estate to use his footage in Superman Returns, and that's what inspired them. So maybe it was very unofficial.
Yeah,
who was watching Superman 5 anyway? Nobody.
No, that was the comeback one. Right? Oh. That was the Brandon Routh.
Oh, that was the Brandon Routh one. Oh, sorry, I was mixed up.
Yeah.
You're right. No, they got permission from his estate.
Right.
He got. Right. Sorry, I mixed it up with Superman 4. Sorry.
Yeah.
The Quest for Peace.
Yes.
Famously terrible one.
Yeah.
No, they did get permission from his estate. Yeah, that's what kicked off the Donner thing, because suddenly they could use his imagery, so we could release a version that had that original footage in it. Okay, for those that aren't following, the Donner cut comes out in 2006.
Yeah.
Richard Donner apparently had very little to do with it.
Yeah, it was, well, it sounds like the Snyder cut in a sense.
Yeah.
I mean...
Boy, people make that
there's a lot of
online a lot.
Yeah, there are a lot of points of comparison there.
So, alright, so when Donner hears that Marlon Brando is not allowed to be in part 2, he complains about it.
Oh, okay.
He's angry about it. Really angry. He says this is ridiculous, you know. He also really, really hates Pierre Spengler. Mm-hmm. And has gone on, has made a public announcement that he will never work with him again.
Okay.
So, in March 1979, the Salkinds replace Richard Donner with Richard Lester.
Okay.
They're both called Richard. At that time, Donner was in Europe promoting part 1, and depending on who you read, Donner says he never heard he read about it in the paper.
Huh.
Other sources say he was sent a telegram.
Okay.
I read a long interview with the Salkinds, the younger Salkind, Ilya.
Okay.
On Superman Super Site, or one of those, the Superman homepage. Mm-hmm. That's it, on the Superman homepage, where he tells a story that's obviously more favourable to him.
Yeah.
He says, first of all, that we sacked Donner because he was always going over budget and because he was uncommunicative or something like that. And then he said that I tried to call him many times, but couldn't get a hold of him.
Huh.
And the Salkinds, as I said, when we did 79, seemed like extremely dodgy people.
Yeah.
I absolutely do not believe their version of events whatsoever. Yeah. I think they just decided they could do it more easily and cheaply with Lester and stiffed Richard Donner.
Yeah. Okay, so also, by the way, this one, the credits, when we should go over Metropolis, it really seemed to me more obvious that it was New York than the previous movie. Somehow, I don't know if it's a distance.
Twin Towers are right there.
Twin Towers are right there, all that kind of stuff.
But that happened in the last movie,
It did, but I don't know why I noticed it more this time. Anyway, Clark shows up at the Daily Planet. Now, I've seen this movie several times. Not as many as the first one. I've probably seen this 10 times. There was stuff in here that I didn't notice before, or stuff that I'd forgotten about. Yep. There's a scene here where he walks in the office, he throws his hat behind his head, and it lands on the hat rack.
Yeah.
He doesn't know he's done it until he turns around, or he acts like he doesn't know that he's successfully done this hat throw.
Yep.
And then he turns around and it's actually landed there. I laughed the whole way through this movie at a lot of deliberate jokes, I have to say, like this one. But he arrives and Skippy tells him that there's a terrorist attack in Paris, and Lois is out there, and the terrorists have a nuclear bomb.
Hydrogen bomb.
Bomb, yeah.
Well, which is a nuclear bomb.
Yeah. So Clark's like, okay, he sneaks out, and he's going to fly out there. Meanwhile,
so there's a pretty funny line. He says they're going to blow up Paris with a hydrogen bomb, and Clark says, that's terrible. And Skippy says, that's why they're called terrorists.
Yes.
Which made me laugh.
Yes.
Also, there's a picture on the wall of Jackie Cooper's office, which seems to be a picture of Bill Cosby.
I noticed this because it's prominently in the shot, and also when Zod shows up later, it's behind his head in the shot.
Why is there a prominent picture of Bill Cosby?
Am I just not able to tell black people apart? Is this a different black person that looks like Bill Cosby that is famous in journalism? Why would there be a photo of Bill Cosby?
It looks so much like Bill Cosby. I just assumed it was Bill Cosby.
I did too, both times. I was like, how? But how? Why? So strange.
Know. Why would you have it there?
So strange.
I have to listen to the director's commentary. Ah, well.
Yep.
Oh, well.
Okay, so meanwhile, in Paris, Lois is up to some great Lois shenanigans. She sneaks past this guard that's guarding the Eiffel Tower that's not letting any reporters past.
She tricks him into looking up a word in the dictionary.
Yep.
And then sneaks past
And
him.
it's very silly, but it's not any sillier than the way they stole that nuke where Miss Tessmacher pretended to be unconscious.
I'm
It's
fine with
fine.
it
It's
so far.
absolutely fine. I like that she's like, I'm getting this story. She sneaks in there.
She hides under the lift that goes up the Eiffel Tower, and she's saying to herself, Pulitzer Prize, capital P.
Yes.
And then as the...
She also says Nobel Prize, capital N. There's no Nobel Prize for journalism.
I think she's thinking of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Oh, okay.
Because she's...
Okay.
Maybe she's up to... She's panicking.
Yeah.
She needs to convince herself that everything's going to be okay, and she's decided she's going to foil the terrorist attempt and get the Nobel Peace Prize as well.
Right, okay.
The Eiffel Tower makes a reappearance on the podcast.
Yes. Yes.
Last scene in Barry McKenzie holds his own.
Yes. She goes up there. By the way, one of the terrorists is played by Richard
Griffiths. Yep.
Who's Uncle Dursley.
Yeah.
And also was in With Neil and I.
Yes, he was. He was Uncle Monty.
Uncle Monty.
Uncle Monty, Uncle Dursley.
Yeah. I didn't spot this. Ashton spotted it.
I spotted it. He wasn't even that old. You know, when he died, he was only in his 60s when he died.
Right.
He was just a man that was born to play uncles.
Right. Well, here he's Uncle Terrorist.
It's only his second film role. Terrorist number 3.
Right.
Is his credit.
Right. Okay, so the terrorists release their hostages. They activate the nuke.
No, they don't. The French police, the French special forces do it by accident.
Oh, right. Okay.
And they have a plan to they blow up the cables on the lift because they want the bomb to come down. This seems extremely risky, but they want the bomb to come down before the terrorists have armed it, so they can separate the terrorists from the bomb. Except they've got a dead man switch or something. There's some very confusing dialogue where Uncle Monty says, if I drop this, it will go off.
Yeah.
And then sure enough, that's what he does.
Right.
Because when the French use plastic explosives to blow up the cables on the lift to make it drop, Lois is still underneath the lift, incidentally. And the control panel is yanked out of Uncle Monty's hands, hits the ground, and then he says, well, it's armed. We're all screwed. There's 60 seconds till it goes off.
Right.
The lift is plummeting down. Incidentally, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but lifts have safety brakes.
Yes.
It's the whole reason lifts go more than one floor. Lifts did not travel more than one floor until they invented these safety brakes to make them safe. They turn on when the lift starts to drop. Anyway, the lift is dropping. Lois is going to die. Luckily, Superman is he's flown across the Earth really quickly.
Yep.
He rescues her, of course.
Yep.
And then he takes the bomb and throws it into outer space.
Well, he flies with it past the moon, which seemed like overkill to me.
It is.
I think you could let a nuke go off.
You could leave it in cis-lunar space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he flies it past the moon, and the shockwaves from it blow him back and also shatter the Phantom Zone mirror, which is not far from the moon for some reason.
Why? Because everything is always around planet Earth.
Yes.
There's
there's a lot of very
connecting.
convenient things that happen in this movie.
I don't want to talk about the Donner Cut much, but in the Donner Cut, we see the Phantom Zone panel following Clark's rocket, or whatever it is, his capsule.
Right. Yeah, right.
It's been dragged up in the eddy, along with all the kryptonite.
That makes so much more sense.
Presumably.
But it shatters, and it's kind of like this hand-drawn animation of it flying apart.
And they fall out of it. It looks pretty shit.
Yeah. Doesn't look right considering how much money went into this movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so meanwhile, there's a lot of this movie does some very tricky things with the editing. Much like, it reminded me of Empire Strikes Back, where Luke does his Jedi training in equivalent 2 to 3 days. It's kind of that kind of funny stuff happening here.
Yeah, except it works way less well. So here we cut to, I think it's Luther in jail, right? Is this where we're cutting to?
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
We are still in Metropolis. This is when Clark comes back to the office. A taxi drives into him, and it smashes up. Lois, there's a hilarious shot which I'd never noticed before. She's squeezing oranges by the dozen to make fresh squeezed oranges. She only drinks that. But then there's an insert shot of her putting out her cigarette in the ashtray. It's just full. It's like piled with cigarette butts.
Yeah, she's a chain smoker now.
It's really funny.
Yes, but there's a dark side to this, which don't let me forget. I'll return to it.
Okay. But she tells Clark, he's like acting all shy and in his inferiority complex
Yep.
with Superman. She's like, you need to be aggressive. You'll be fine,
Yep.
You're a good friend, whatever. He says, oh, friend, okay. That kind of stuff.
He acts like he's jealous of Superman all the time.
Yes.
Except he is Superman.
He is Superman. He's jealous of her attraction to Superman.
But, yeah.
But they have this exact discussion in the movie.
Yeah, they
We'll get to
do.
it much
Yeah, they
later,
do.
yeah.
And it doesn't make any more sense. This whole
I don't know
thing...
if it doesn't make...
I hate this. I'm sorry, I hate this. Anytime we're dealing with the interpersonal relationship between Lois and Clark, I was just bored to tears. And I didn't think it was funny or clever.
I didn't mind any of this stuff, but I can't remember what I was going to say about it. But anyway, we'll come. I'm sure it'll come back around.
Of course, yeah.
Okay, now we get to the prison scene. This is a great scene with Gene Hackman,
Yep.
Lex, and Ned Beatty as Otis. And there's a moment here where, as he's walking away talking to Otis, he turns to one of the other inmates and says, I want my Liberace record back. So funny. I laughed.
May have been an ad-lib.
Maybe, yeah.
I read that there was some scenes some ad-lib scenes that Hackman did, and I wouldn't be surprised if that was an ad-lib.
It's brilliant.
Why would... it's very funny. He's wearing the ball cap here.
Yes. And he's built some sort of black box which is going to allow him to figure out where Superman is.
Yes.
Because it tracks alpha waves.
I love this. Okay, now are you ready for the payoff?
Okay.
It tracks alpha waves. Okay, what are alpha waves? Okay, it's possible he means alpha radiation.
Okay.
Alpha particles that are emitted from volatile... the least powerful form of radiation.
Okay.
But that doesn't... of ionizing radiation, and that doesn't penetrate more than a few inches of atmosphere, or it can't even go through skin. So it's probably not that. The other thing that alpha waves might refer to is brain waves.
Yeah. That's what I assumed it was.
The waves of a brain at rest. And, I feel like we read something that implied that Kryptonian brainwaves are much stronger than average brainwaves.
Yeah. I just like the fact that it was such a generic explanation, much like that ray beam that he used to destroy the mountain that Superboy used. There's just like some rando bunch of words, science words smashed together. There's alpha wave tracker.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. But for me, this is a clear indication that there is a connection between
Yes.
Superboy 293 or whichever issue we read.
Adventure 283, yeah.
Adventure 283
Yeah.
and Superman 2
Yep.
Kryptonian brainwaves.
Yeah, in fact, he detects the waves of the other 3 Kryptonians.
He does.
He says, I'm picking up 3 other waves.
Confirmed.
Yeah. Yep.
This is canon now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now we...
You don't need an EEG. You can detect their brainwaves from outside their head.
Yes. Now we cut to NASA, where John Ratzenberger is an operator. I think he was in the first movie as one of the guys running the nuclear control panel.
Really?
Yes, I do believe he was in that. He was at... I don't know if he lived at Pinewood or what the deal was, because he's in all those Star Wars... He's in like Star Wars... He's in Empire, he's on Hoth, and he's all over the place.
God.
So anyway...
I deny him all-star status.
Yes.
Recognize you.
Yes.
Deny you the rank of all-star. We do not.
Yes. So they've had these astronauts on the moon for 45 days. We hear in this scene.
It's a long time to be on the moon.
It's a long time to be on the moon, and also they are so bored of this mission they don't even check in on them. They're like, oh, I almost forgot about those guys that we left on. I like this. It's very
is like the midnight shift.
It's very comic booky. It's very like in the Superman comics they talk about some Mars mission at one point. So it's like, okay, cool. This is just the state of space exploration at this stage. You just leave these guys out there and forget about them. Okay, but here so there are astronauts on the moon, including a cosmonaut.
Yeah. So this is a joint Soviet-US mission.
Seems to be.
That's pretty cool.
Yep, that is cool. The Phantom Zone villains land on the moon.
They've had a conversation in space, sort of, where they've talked about how they've escaped from the zone and how they're going. But when they're in a system with a single sun, the variable explanations for where Kryptonian powers come from in these movies. Anyway, now, according to Zod, when they're in a system with a single sun, they will manifest superpowers.
A single yellow sun, I think he does say.
He doesn't specify yellow. He just says single star.
Huh.
He does talk about yellow sunlight later, but in this scene he says, you know, they can't even keep it straight in the same movie. I can remember in the first movie, it was the red sun that gave Superman his powers.
Yes.
Just, God, make up your mind.
But remember, there was all that confusion about how long it'd taken to travel to Earth in that first movie as well. There were like errors in there were plot holes in
it's all over the place. Anyway, they've had sort of like a brief conversation and they've flown towards the moon. Now, I don't agree. I think this scene should be terrifying. I would have liked it better if everyone was being a bit more professional.
Yes.
And were properly horrified at seeing suitless monsters walking around on the surface of the moon.
Yes, because they're like doing moonwalking. They're like floating, and Ursa just walks up to him as if she's on in-Earth gravity.
It should be chilling, but unfortunately a lot of it seems to be played for laughs. Like they're kind of
a little bit. It's 50-50. I think they're trying to have it both ways. I think it is terrifying.
It's unsettling, but I think it could have been genuinely frightening.
They're killing these people. She just walks up, pulls his badge off this guy, and kicks him into space.
I feel like if you know, like maybe if people were being more professional at Cape Canaveral, there would be more urgency.
Yes.
In this scene too, and also like they talk with the Kryptonians. With the, how should we call them, the Phantom Zone criminals? You can't talk with people on the moon. There's no atmosphere.
Do they speak to each other?
They do.
Oh, she does speak to him, yeah.
Ursa and Zod.
Yeah,
incidentally, Zod speaks to the cosmonaut in English.
Well, this is what I was getting to. They all speak. They arrive and they speak English.
There's no reason why they should speak English.
That's right.
That's really annoying.
Well, there is a reason why they should speak English, but it's very confusing, and it occurs later on. Later on, we get a scene, once Lex arrives at the Fortress of Solitude, he puts in a crystal, and they hear an earth poem. And the Kryptonian scholar says, this is the earth poem, a tree, and he recites the poem. So they know about Earth, they know Earth history.
We did know that from the first film, because Jor-El knew about it.
He knew about Earth, but he didn't know all their poetry and everything, and their language and everything. It wasn't clear at that point. In this movie, it seems like all of Krypton already knows about Earth.
All of Krypton too. So Jor-El, who was a scientist and maybe had made a special study of Earth, but Zod, why would Zod know English?
Yes, but that's the thing is they don't know about Earth. They're like Planet Houston. They keep thinking it's called Planet Houston.
Why would he know English but not know that Earth is called Earth?
He doesn't know about Earth. They've never heard of Earth. They've come to this random planet as far as they're concerned. But meanwhile,
you're right.
The Fortress of Solitude is giving us information that seems like Krypton knew about Earth.
I always thought that, you're right. Look, to me, I mean, it was always clear that in the comics, the Kryptonians were looking at Earth all the time.
That's right.
And in the first film, it was clear that Jor-El knew about
That's
Earth.
right, he knew. He's going to have amazing powers when he gets there. He knew what the atmosphere was going to do.
And also he knew about sort of like the Earth people had a special destiny and he needed to send Kal-El there for them to achieve their destiny.
Yeah.
My only son.
Yeah.
But why would Zod... So Zod doesn't know anything.
No.
And yet he speaks fluent English.
Yeah.
And we know he's not speaking magic. We know he's not speaking kind of like psychic. He's not telepathically speaking like Esperanto, like space Esperanto, because he speaks to the cosmonaut, and the cosmonaut answers him in Russian.
Yeah.
And he doesn't speak to the cosmonaut in Russian. He speaks to the cosmonaut in English.
Yeah.
The cosmonaut fires off some Russian at him, and he replies, "Fragile kind of life form I see here," Terence Stamp says.
Yeah.
The whole thing's just a mess.
It is 50s science fiction logic where you go to other planets and they speak English on those planets.
I just wish, when I watch this scene, I just think of the wasted potential. It should have been silent as the grave, and
yes,
the Kryptonians should have just, the Phantom Zone criminals should have done everything they did, but just in total silence.
Yeah.
It's already freaky as hell, like when Non is holding down the launcher, and the launcher's collapsing on this poor guy. He's on the moon, and it could have just been, I think it could have been brilliant.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
Yeah. So cut back to the prison. This is a scene I love where it's lights out in the cells and the guard's going by calling lights out, and Luthor's cell light doesn't go out, and he checks on him. Luthor and Otis are playing chess together.
Yep.
But then when the guard stands in front of them, they suddenly disappear, and you see the image protected on his back, and there's a hologram protector in the corner. I have to say, there are hundreds of Silver Age Superman stories
With holograms?
with Lex escaping from prison through some scheme, something he's built in the workshop that allows him to escape. And this is so like that. It could have come straight out of the comics.
Yep.
I really dug it.
Except all he had to do was rig a timer to make the light go out, and that guard would never have noticed that there was no one in that cell.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
Instead, they have this elaborate setup that's revealed as soon as he walks in front of the projector.
Yes. But also in narrative terms, it would not have demonstrated his genius.
I know, right? You had to be a genius to set a light
He built
timer.
this in the license plate shop. So he manages to escape. Miss Teschmacher shows up in a hot air balloon.
Yep.
And they leave Otis behind.
Because he's too heavy.
He's too heavy. He's pulling the balloon
This is
down.
so ridiculous. A hot air balloon.
Yeah.
They're quite noisy. I know you'd think they're quiet, but...
Yeah, I was fine with all of this.
Yeah, well, are you fine with them taking a hot air balloon to the North Pole?
Look, that is the least offensive mode of travel to the North Pole in this movie. We're going to talk about all the other back and from the North Pole journeys that happen.
It's ridiculous. I was so angry.
It's...
People are
Well,
just...
no, they only go part way, because then they get a snowmobile.
You can't take a snowmobile to the North Pole.
You can't do any of these things to the North Pole. They're all done in this movie.
Yeah, at least Lex doesn't hitchhike to the North Pole.
No.
Like Clark does.
Yep. Okay, so... Well, okay, we'll talk about that when we get there. Cut to Niagara Falls. Now, Clark and Lois have been sent there by Perry on a assignment to cover a story about newlywed couples being fleeced in Niagara Falls. Yes. Okay.
How are they being fleeced?
That's never made clear. We
Why
had a
would you
funny
send your
scene
two
in the
top-
honeymoon suite. That's the point of this. And also to put them in an uncomfortable kind of like pretend marriage
the best you could
situation.
do.
But they've got this pink bearskin rug that is made of polyester. There's the vibrating bed. As soon as Clark sits on it, the bed goes. There's this fireplace just has these gigantic flames. Laughed at all these bits. Of course, it doesn't make sense that they've been sent all the way to Niagara Falls to cover this story by a major metropolitan newspaper in Metropolis. But there's a kid playing on the rails and falls over into the falls. So Clark has to run away, turn into Superman, and fly back and save the kid. There's a really funny line, one I never noticed before, where in a lady, you get an ADR of this lady saying, "Oh, what a nice man." Of course he's Jewish, she says. Which is true, actually, but that was really... I never noticed it before somehow. It was really funny.
I wrote that down too.
So... But now Lois is starting to suspect.
Yeah, that Clark has shown up. Sorry, that Superman has shown up where Clark is.
He's also had to take off his glasses for a moment, where it got misted up, and she's like seen his face and gotten a little bit like, wait a second, that guy looks just like Superman.
Yep.
Now we get to the Fortress of Solitude. So Lex and Miss Teschmacher arrive there. We hear the poem about the tree.
Yep.
And
then Marlon Brando's footage has been replaced by footage of I don't know the actor's name, the actress's name,
Susannah York.
Susannah York as
Lara.
Carlisle's as Carlisle's mother.
Yeah. Now
she's now in charge of telling him stuff.
Yes.
And specifically, she's telling him about the Phantom Zone.
Okay, so Lex Luthor picks a random crystal.
Yeah.
Puts it into a random... He's at this crystal control panel. He doesn't know what anything is. He chooses one at random, puts it in a random place. Suddenly we get a message, very conveniently, is about the Phantom Zone, and specifically about the three worst criminals which were ever put in there. By the way, as far as we know from the timeline of the first movie, they were put in the zone, and then the planet exploded. Yeah. So how was this message recorded?
Yeah. Well, it's sort of like an interactive...
It is interactive.
Program, isn't it? And it's sort of...
Well, no, because this first time, he says it's pre-recorded. Lex says it's pre-recorded. Later on, we get a scene where he's definitely seems to be interacting. Clark's interacting with it. Definitely. So it's trying to be two ways about this. But even if it's interactive, how does this computer system know that the Phantom Zone villains have been sentenced? That those three are in the Phantom Zone?
It's implied that it's just a massive coincidence. Yeah, because they were literally put in just before the thing exploded. You're right. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. It
doesn't make sense. It's too bad, because Gene Hackman has some funny lines.
Yes. Oh yeah. No, all this stuff
Gene
is
Hackman
good.
is funny.
Miss Tessmacher's really funny. She's like just kind of parroting everything he says when he walks through. He's like, "It's genius," and she's like, "It's genius," which she did in the first movie too.
Yeah.
But it's really great.
It's a shame she's barely in it, and she's barely in it because she was one of the people that walked off after Donna
Okay.
was replaced.
That's too bad.
So Lara tells Gene... So Gene Hackman has come... Lex Luthor has come all the way to the Fortress of Solitude in the North Pole. He stays, he watches one YouTube video,
Yeah.
and then he leaves.
Yes.
That was the point of this?
Yes.
So
Not only that, he...
This is absolutely... This is it? You just walk in, watch one video, and leave?
Well,
he
I
watches
think...
two.
Okay.
He watches trees, and then he watches Lara telling about...
I have some headcanon about this. He has detected 3 other alpha wave sources. So once he's heard this, he has a curious look on his face, like, wait a second. And
Oh, he knows that
Lara says a nuclear explosion could set them free. She says this in the video.
She says, a nuclear explosion in space could set them free.
Where in space?
First of all, Kumar, our sun is a nuclear explosion in
Yes.
space.
Yes.
And now, the universe is big. There's a lot of space between stars.
Yeah.
But the universe is still full of stars.
Yes. Yes.
They'd have got out in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Lots of things could have happened out there to set them free before this date. The same day that he managed to get out of jail, I guess. Or the same timeline anyway. So yeah, he leaves. By the way, Valerie Perrine, Miss Tessmacher, mentions that there's no toilet in the fortress.
Yeah.
We learned that the layout of this place is very weird a little bit later on, in terms of like where the bedroom is in relation to the control room. So I have trouble believing there's no toilet in there. Anyway.
Well, how would you know? Would you recognize a Kryptonian toilet? Who knows? It might be like the 3 seashells.
Exactly. I guess so. You're right. Okay, so Lex leaves to find the 3 alpha waves. That's now his priority.
Okay, fair enough. And he knows that they're criminals.
Yes.
And we get some ADR.
Lots of ADR in this
Apparently
movie.
done.
Lots of ADR.
Apparently, this ADR is done not by Gene Hackman himself, but by a Gene Hackman impersonator.
Interesting. I believe it. There's a lot of stuff, like especially the second time when he comes back to the fortress where there's shots behind his back.
It's a double.
It's double. Yeah.
Because,
and
like Miss
ADR.
Tessmacher, Gene Hackman did not come back
Right.
for the reshoots. He refused.
Right. Right. Okay, so,
Yeah, we get some ADR where he says, "Oh, these sound like my kind of people.
yeah.
Criminals.
Yes.
I can't wait to meet them.
Yeah.
They must be the 3 other alpha wave signals I detected." Yeah.
Right.
So that's now, you're right, that's now his priority.
But he doesn't know that there's been a nuclear explosion in space. I guess it was in the newspapers, maybe.
The sun is a nuclear explosion in space.
So Lois is now... We've cut back to Lois. This is the same scene. She's like, "Okay, I think you're Superman," and she throws herself into the falls.
Yeah.
By the way, I was there a few years back, and you can't get that close to jump in anymore. Maybe you could in 1980.
You probably could.
I had been in there in 1980, but I can't remember if you could jump in. Anyway, so she jumps in, but Clark, she thinks Clark is going to turn into Superman and rescue her, and that will prove it.
Yeah.
But what he does is he uses heat vision to knock a branch off of a tree, and he says, "Grab the branch." She grabs the branch. He jumps in. He pretends to almost drown, and
The scene is so lame. There's no look. There's no stakes because
the stakes are his secret identity.
you have to. It begs the question, right? And the question is, why does it matter that his secret identity is revealed or not? Unless you accept that the world will end if Superman's secret identity is revealed, it's hard to care about it.
So in the lore,
yeah.
the lore is that if Superman's identity was revealed, criminals would go after his loved ones.
Yeah.
Right? They'd go after his mom and dad or whoever was still around him. I think there was a problem in the movie. The movies have never established this. We don't know if he has any loved ones that are still alive or anyone, who would be harmed if the world knew.
Yeah, exactly. And, there are plenty of people in public life who have loved ones and who interact, like attorneys general,
Yeah.
prosecutors.
Yeah.
These people, they don't have secret identities.
Yes, but look, I actually don't care. It's just a convention.
But it's,
Of
because I didn't
Superman.
spend my childhood adoring Superman like you
Yeah.
did, for me, I just roll my eyes at this because there are no stakes. that I care about.
But it's a convention of
It's a fallacy.
Superman and a convention of all superhero comics have followed.
Because, well, eventually they sort of do away with it.
Well, the Marvel movies, I think, are what did away with it.
Well, Iron Man didn't have a secret identity, did he?
He did.
Oh, okay.
It was only the movie.
We've had this conversation.
Yeah.
No. It precedes. We had this conversation. Let's not revisit it. But I just feel like you have to say, because it is a terrible thing that my secret identity will be revealed, I must stop Lois from finding out my secret identity. But that begs the question, is it terrible if it is revealed? And the movies, as you pointed out just now, don't address that. We're just left to think nothing's more important than Superman protecting his secret identity.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I get the sense that he wants to also have a normal, quote-unquote, normal life, living as an ordinary person. And that's why he maintains the Clark identity.
It's hard. He does say that he likes being Clark sometimes.
Yeah.
But here, like we said, God, it was a long time ago when we were talking about Superman 79. Here, Clark is just a role that he plays.
Yes.
It's not... I mean, the comics have gone back and forth on who's the real Kal-El, right? Is he Superman or is he Clark Kent? Here, he's Superman because the character of Clark Kent is just so ridiculous. It's so performative because he's pretending to be dweeby and clumsy and a nebbish.
Yeah. It's
so
also
clearly
hard
a
because
role.
in the first movie we had the balance of his human father versus his Kryptonian father as well. So there was that part of his identity that was there that he was
That's a big part of it, yeah.
influenced by his human father, and that was the Clark part of himself, right?
And here, we don't have that here.
We don't have that presence in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think also at this stage, I mean, everybody in the world knows Clark and Lois and the secret identity business, and it's almost maybe expected of the franchise at this stage for this question to be coming up.
Of course.
You know, in the Snyder movie, they throw this out in the first movie. They get rid of it. She figures out her identity.
Understandable, because we're
It is like understandable, but heartless. Like there's no joy in it. You know what I mean?
I'd say
there's no fun in it.
And that's it, isn't it? You have to suspend disbelief.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. We're much more cynical these days, I suppose.
Yes. Okay, so meanwhile, after this rigmarole with her being rescued by the Branch, the 3 Phantom Zone villains arrive on Earth.
Yep.
In a scene pretty similar to Supergirl's arrival on Earth, which we talked about a few weeks ago.
It almost seems like the same set.
Almost.
You know what? It's probably the same place at the back of Pinewood.
Yeah, maybe so.
Not maybe
Was that shot at Pinewood, though?
Yes, it was.
Okay, all right.
It was just out the back of... I bet you it's the same place.
Okay.
That's amazing.
So there's I always remember this scene as a kid. They land in the water, or Zod lands in the water, but then he says curious substance or surface or
surface.
Because
he thinks he's supposed to... Has he never seen water?
I guess they don't have water on Krypton or in their bodies or anywhere. But anyway, he kind of floats up and walks on water.
Looks great.
Looks really great, but the first instance of a power which we've never seen Kryptonians exhibit before.
I'm fine with it because it's just flight, isn't it?
Yes,
it's
exactly.
It's just their gravity manipulation.
You don't even think about it too much.
No.
Now, watching it after having watched the movie many times, and you're like, what are all these weirdo powers?
There are heaps of weirdo powers in the film, I agree, but I feel like this one is just flight.
Right. But I always love this old man that's fishing and looks at his cup of coffee and then throws it out.
Nice and understated humour.
Yeah.
A snake bites Ursa. How would a snake bite Ursa? Ursa's skin is as hard as diamond.
I think it tried to bite her.
But she reacts with pain?
There's a lot of questions about strength levels. A lot of humans are like putting up resistance. They have to get shoved pretty hard by these Kryptonians sometimes.
It's just very wibbly wobbly. What their abilities are, how they work.
Yes.
Very wobbly. It's sort of implied that they will... I think there is a line that they will get stronger.
Yeah, it's implied that they're getting more...
Says that our powers will grow and we'll get more powers as we go along. Yeah. And that sort of happens because Ursa is the first to use heat vision.
That's right.
She fries this snake.
Yeah.
And then Non picks up this barbecued snake, and then he tries to use heat vision on it, but he can't do it.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like a running gag for the next 15
Weird
minutes.
sound effects for Non's voice. Weird
There's sort of
he's like weird vocalizing.
well, he's mute,
Yeah.
and yet they've sort of added. I suppose it's meant to be like roaring, like animal sounds,
right. But it's just like very quiet.
Sort of like if you turned an elephant's trumpet way down.
Yeah.
Incidentally, Terence Stamp's voice goes up and down a lot. Did you notice? I think they add an effect sometimes to make him sound deeper.
Huh. Weird.
Yeah.
Didn't notice that.
But only sometimes.
How odd.
I guess to make him more intimidating. I suppose they did it to make him more intimidating, made his voice deeper at times.
Okay.
But they didn't apply it consistently.
Okay.
And certainly, Terence Stamp aggression, he's amazing.
He is amazing. Sarah Douglas is awesome in this movie.
Yeah.
As Ursa. I love them. I really love them both. I know so many of their lines by heart from even just watching the movie the first time. I remember they were so imprinted on my mind. They're just really perfect for each other. They play off each other so
Gene
well.
Hackman's great when he's playing off Terence Stamp.
Oh my god, it's so
any scene where they're together
glorious.
is fantastic.
Yes.
He's just... I've got Kneel Before Zod.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a line.
Yeah. Yes.
And he just says it all the time.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
Someone in the Oval Office says, "Oh God," and he corrects him. He goes,
Zod. Zod. It's really...
He's fabulous.
He is really great.
Yep, and Sarah Douglas, gorgeous and really just
and they have a
icy and formidable. And she's wearing this. Her costume is split.
Oh,
I guess it's not very progressive, but her costume is sexier.
She's showing a lot of thigh. Absolutely.
It's split down the arms and it's split down the thighs.
Yeah.
Because of that, for the flight scenes, her harness couldn't fit her entire torso because of the splitting. Meant that you could see the harness. So she was only able to have a belt.
Whoa, okay.
Which meant that there were a lot of retakes whenever she did a backflip because she wasn't supported properly.
Okay.
She said if she hadn't been 27 years old and in reasonably good shape,
yeah, right.
she probably would have sustained some serious injuries.
Right.
In addition, I read a couple of interviews with her over the last 4 years. I read one from 2020 and one from just last October that she did for Chicago radio. She also said that that's not her hair.
Okay.
So she has a short hairstyle in the film. That's not her hair, it's a wig. She had long hair at the time.
Oh.
Nobody asked her to cut it.
Huh.
They just, I guess, assumed she wouldn't be cool with it and just lined her up for a wig fitting.
Huh.
So she would have to come in extra early,
Right.
of course, to get her hair pinned up
Okay.
and put under the sock or whatever you call it, and then have the wig put on top. She said it always got her in a really pissy mood. Which was great for playing Ursa.
Oh, interesting. I met her at a con here a few years ago, and she's so great. Just so great. But I think I want to say is the outfit, so we don't have the General Zod military outfit, but there's some kind of vibe going on here. It's like a bondage vibe or like a German
dominatrix
disco vibe or
German
something.
disco. Yeah.
Something's going on. It's a really good look.
It's so good, and they often move in unison.
Yes.
Sarah Douglas said that Terence Stamp came up with that.
Right. Okay.
Although she also said that he denies it.
Okay.
But that allegedly he said, we're aliens, we're on Earth, this is our first time here, we need to act in a way that shows that we're really alien. I think we should all move as much in unison as possible.
Okay.
So they often have the same pose, standing equidistant.
Yes.
The guy that plays Non is really good too.
Yes.
Big unit.
Jack O'Halloran.
Jack O'Halloran.
Who's a boxer, I believe.
Wow. He's wearing lifts.
Right.
They really need to shoot him above the ankles a bit more because he has big shoes.
Yes.
But I don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so to give him a few extra inches of height to make him even more impressive. He's already a really impressive dude.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is wicked facial hair. And yet it's funny how childlike he is too.
He's a bit like Leatherface in the first Texas Chainsaw movie.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Yeah, so now, cut back to Niagara Falls.
Oh, okay.
Clark, they've dried off after this escapade where they both fell in the water. Lois is looking for a comb. Clark says, I'll get it. He trips over the head of the pink bear, his hand falls into the fire, his glasses fall off, he scrambles and gets his glasses back on. Lois is like, oh my god, let me see your hand.
And of course,
there's
it's
no
completely
burns.
unburned.
And he, for a second, tries to cover it up, but then he just has to admit that he is Superman. And he says, I don't know why I did that. I really like this moment, because there was no reason for him to trip on that bare head. And they discuss this. They're like...
I'll give the film credit. They
she's
do
like, maybe you wanted... He says, I don't think I wanted to.
Superman can't trip over a rug.
Yeah. And he's like, I don't think I wanted to. She said, maybe you did in your heart.
Yeah. At least they lampshade it.
Yes. So I did like that the idea that he subconsciously was like, I just have to let go of this. And he's like, okay, we better have a talk. And they're going to go elsewhere. Meanwhile, we keep cutting back and forth. Now we're cutting to this country town, where
it's Houston. It's called Houston.
It's like East Houston.
It's not the
or
Houston.
It's
called East Houston in like Iowa or something.
Yeah, that's right. It's somewhere. Anyway, there's a sheriff driving along, having a random conversation with his deputy.
This is terrible.
Dwayne.
About fish in the restaurant. Or something.
the guy doesn't want to try at this restaurant. Dwayne, the deputy, doesn't want to go to this restaurant. Blah blah blah. It doesn't really matter. But they pull up, and the three villains are standing in the road, blocking this car, and they're like, "Get out of the way!" They're in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
They're like, they don't need this car. They can just fly over the car.
Terence Stamp has some great dialogue where he says they've turned on their blinkers, like the siren, and he goes, I like that flashing light. It reminds me of Krypton's red sun.
Yes.
But I do not like that noise.
Yes. Yes, it's really great. And then Non actually rips the light off and hands it to him, like,
Yeah.
like, you want this? And Zod's like, he's like the Otis to Zod.
Yeah.
But here we get another power, which is they are able to, like, levitate. Like, the guy comes out, Dwayne comes out with a shotgun.
Yeah.
And I think Ursa or someone uses her eye beams to levitate this gun.
Zod himself.
Zod uses...
First he heats it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine. That's heat vision.
Well, it's not fine because the gun has a wooden stock.
What about the barrel? That's... Okay.
It's...
Okay.
Anyway, but the whole thing glows. Whatever. Annoying. And then the heat beams seamlessly transition to a tractor beam?
Yes, exactly. What is this? How did this power emerge? And they use it. They start using it a lot
because it's just goofiness.
Yeah.
Zod discharges the gun into his own chest.
Yes,
which is cool.
He's like, he says he has a great line about that too.
He says something about it being noisy.
Noisy weapon or something like that.
I love Terence Stamp in this. Yeah. I just love it. Sometimes I'll just go on YouTube and watch Zod scenes.
Yeah. Meanwhile, at the fortress, Lois and Superman arrive.
Yep.
They're
taking it to it. He says, "Let's go to my place," which is the fortress. He
kind of shows her around. He shows her the green crystal. He tries to kind of explain it to her. She doesn't quite get it, but she kind of sits on it and leaves it embedded in the snow, which comes back.
I guess it's a plot point, or
it is it is a plot point. It's like embedded there for a later act. But he flies to St. Lucia actually to pick her some flowers off the mountains. Comes back. I think this is the scene where they have the chat about his identity.
Yes.
And I did like that they were going into all this stuff where he's trying to define what the two identities were and why he had two identities, and she's confused, like, but you are Clark. How can you be jealous, etc., that kind of thing. I was fine with all that. Yeah. Meanwhile, back at the country town, all these things are happening simultaneously. The Phantom Zone villains show up in this town, and they start trashing the place. Effectively, there's a little scene where Ursa arm wrestles this big dude and smashes the table. It's really great.
And then another one of the local toughs comes up and says, "Woman or not, you're going to be spitting teeth."
Yeah.
And she throws him out.
Yeah.
The sheriffs have rolled up. They see him come flying out, and then they roll their eyes. They know, they just know, I guess, that it's the Phantom Zone criminals.
They're not quite sure, I think, but then Dwayne runs up to the door, and he sees them in there, and then he runs back, like, oh, it's them.
Yeah. And then they just start wrecking this town.
Yes, and there's a moment here which I've remembered my entire life from the very first time I watched it, because I laughed so hard, where Zod is torturing some man, and this little kid runs up and says, "That's my dad. Please leave him alone." please leave him alone,
Put him down or
mister.
something like
Leave him
that.
alone, mister. And Ursa says, he's a general. And he says, please, Mr. General. And for some reason, I latched onto that.
Yep. It's pretty terrible. When
Okay.
the army rolls up, this film has a $54 million budget in $1980. They can't afford or they couldn't get any military equipment.
There's one Jeep and a bunch of guys that are not in formation. They're
It's not
just
a real
running
Jeep.
very loosely.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
They're not, as you said, they're not in, like, this. I guess it was in the UK. And the helicopter that shows up shortly is not an army helicopter.
No,
they're sending
but
attack
the
helicopters.
effect of it crashing is great,
Yeah,
actually.
that is
I guess it was maybe done with miniatures, I'm not sure, but
this is, it's just sort of like a civilian helicopter that they've put some prop guns on.
yeah. The president's watching all this on TV, by the way.
Yep, whose face we don't see.
No, we see the back of his head. I guess that
for
that
the
comes
setup
up
for this
later.
later
It's a
scene.
setup for later. But it does play. I remember watching it this time, thinking, "Oh, it's supposed to be like Reagan, but they don't want to show his face because they don't actually have Reagan, if you know what I mean." Okay, so Zod basically takes over this town. I found this really interesting too because it really shows the difference, what a difference morality makes in terms of Superman living on Earth versus the fandom's own villains coming to Earth. They just take over on him. It's so easy for them to just have their way, destroy everything, take over.
Yeah, they're invincible and superpowered.
Yes.
It's lucky they're dumb, and all they want to all Zod wants, luckily, I kept watching this, I thought of Miracle Man.
Yeah, I thought of that too.
And there are some issues in Miracle Man where Kid Miracle Man destroys London.
Yes.
And it's not cute or funny.
No.
It's horrifying.
Yeah. We'll talk. I was going to talk about that one later
we'll come
on.
back to
the
it.
climax.
Great.
Yeah.
But but here they just kind of do silly things like, I mean, this is a film for children.
Yeah.
Like making the kid's daddy go up high in the air and then dropping him down, things like that. Ursa has a line, or I think it's Ursa that has a line with the helicopter flying around. She says, "They need machines to fly."
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And I watched that and I thought, so did you?
Yes.
When you were on Krypton?
Yes, that's why I wrote it down. They need machines to fly. Until 10 minutes ago, guess what? You needed machines too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why is that line in there?
Yeah, it's as if they've been living here for a long time or something. Very weird.
Ugh.
Okay, Clark has a conversation with Laura. He wants to marry Lois. He's convinced. Now it's on.
And she says, you
Laura
can only have a relationship with a human being if
you're immortal.
If you become mortal.
Yeah.
Mortal is the word.
That's a strange word to use.
Consistent with, I suppose, what we might call the iconography of Part 1.
Yeah.
Where he's literally a deity.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
not
I guess
literally,
so. But there's a weird moment here where she actually steps out of the hologram chamber and is having a conversation.
Yeah, he's conversing with her. So this is
before she's on he's talking to screen, but now she walks away from that and actually forms like a physical body.
Bit weird.
Very weird. You know, a lot of like movies and TV don't understand what holograms are, and like the kind of interaction. Anyway, I guess it doesn't really matter. So there's a special chamber that he goes into, and it will depower him. When I was a kid, this scene scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, it's actually kind of a bit grim.
It's like, so first you get this kind of, he steps into it and he has a nightmare vision of himself standing in like a hallway with a fire behind him.
Yeah.
It's a weird, spooky, metaphysical kind of moment.
Yeah.
And then we see like all the skin is stripped off his face and down to the skeleton and it's rebuilt up.
Yep.
I was very scared of skeletons as a kid, so that was part of this. Like, I was really freaked out by it. And then he like separates into two beings, one which has like normal human clothes.
Yeah. Well, one's Clark and one's
Clark and one's
yeah.
Superman. I always like it when it does the kind of stuff they do in Superman 3 as well.
Yeah, it was alright.
At length. But I did think it was weird. Oh, he's got clothes on, but then actually kind of explain it as if there's like one, and like the Superman version kind of fades. He's just got his like head down in the chamber. He's just got.
And the Clark one walks out. Now he's been depowered, and apparently it was a bit of an intense experience. Like clearly an intense experience because we get all this imagery.
Yeah.
This symbolic imagery of him being broken down and built back up.
And in this hallway of fire.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff.
Bear that in mind.
Yeah.
Because apparently this is an intense experience.
Oh, yes.
So he comes out, and then it's
So Lois has witnessed all this happen. The control panel explodes. The crystal control panel.
That's the other thing. So they don't really lean heavily into this in the film, but what happens is that Lana says there's no going back. If you do this, you will you will never be Superman again.
Yeah.
You will be human.
Yeah.
Fully human.
Yeah.
And with no return. And like, why?
Yeah. Because you got to make it sound like it's.
There has to be stakes.
There has to be stakes.
So this,
but
and
it's
then the console.
It's a cheat. It's a total cheat.
Yeah. Why wouldn't the process? The process is reversible.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Kal-El, you want to have sex with your human girlfriend.
Yeah.
Go in the chamber for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah.
Then you can have your powers back after.
Yes. Well, okay. We got to talk about this even more as we get through it. But anyway...
Because the next thing they do is have sex.
Yes, we have a post-coital scene in the silver bed, which is right around the corner from the control panel. It's just... They walk up 3 steps.
Kryptonian aesthetics. You just have your bed right near your workspace.
Yes, it's a weird, like, silver bed.
It's a big beanbag.
I always thought it was, like, funny.
It's like a beanbag.
Yes, it is a big...
And, like, they're not... I don't know, like, this is 1980. I guess it's fine that they're... it's premarital sex.
It is, yeah. It's sex out of wedlock, but we don't know if they're Christians on Krypton, so it might not matter as far as he's concerned. But...
So I guess giving up your powers is an analogy for marriage.
This one scene is the seed, literally, of the whole plot of Superman 5. Yeah. The Brandon Routh one, because there's a child as a result of this one.
I don't remember a damn thing about that movie.
Yeah, well, we'll get to it eventually. Anyway, Mount Rushmore is destroyed. The by the Phantom Zone villains. They arrive at the White House.
They destroy it. They replace the images of the presidents with their own images.
That's right. They just zap it. Very easy job.
It's their powers.
Yeah.
My head canon. I'm starting to hate that word. Is that they use super speed.
I agree. Mine too. Yeah. Mine too. That was fine.
Yeah.
Okay, they arrive at the White House. They put a decoy in there first before the president. This guy walks out, this bald guy. He's like, "I'm the president," and Zod says, "Kneel before Zod." He kneels, and he says,
"You're not the president."
Yeah.
No one that leads
so
many people would have knelt so quickly.
Yeah.
And then out steps the real president,
Ronald Reagan, apparently.
Yeah, he's played by a character...
E.G. Marshall?
That's it, E.G. Marshall. With a long career in Hollywood. Another person that refused to come back for reshoots. So this is all Donna shot material here.
Right, okay.
Anytime the Phantom Zone villains are throwing down with people on Earth, it's so cool.
Yeah.
They're just knocking them around, knocking them into walls.
Yeah.
Breaking guns in half, pushing... A favourite thing of Non is to push down a supporting, like a load-bearing beam or structure and make the roof collapse on somebody. He just does it over and over and over. He does it at the Daily Planet. He does it in the White House.
It's the kids' attack. So it's the kids' show version. Because this is what they did in the X-Men cartoons with Wolverine. He would just always knock stuff over with his claws.
You can't punch.
Or Leonardo's sword in TMNT. He would just knock down this pillar and the building would fall on the guy. Yeah. And we would assume he survived it.
Yep. That's it. Because you can't... Because punching and stabbing is...
That is Miracle Man number 15.
Inappropriate level.
Literally rip all their hands off and have a rain of hands from the sky is what happens in that comic. And kind of what happens in Snyder's Man of Steel, which we'll also talk about a little bit when we get to the end of this.
One day. Yeah, well, okay, sure.
My favorite line in this scene is when the president says, "I will bow down to you, but there is one man who will not." And Zod says, "Who is this imbecile?"
Everything that Zod says.
Yeah.
Everything.
Yes, and this is the "Oh God, Zod" line as well. Zod. Okay, now Clark and Lois drive a car back to civilization.
How did they do that?
Where was the car?
Where was the car? They were.
He could not fly. He flew to the North Pole. Yep. Then they had to walk to a car somewhere.
Well, I mean, you say they drove a car, but we just see them driving a car back in civilization. Yeah. They might not have taken that car from the... I doubt they took that car from the North Pole. How did they get from the North Pole?
To wherever the car was. That's my question.
Yeah. Well, to civilization.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
Clark doomed them to eternal, probably death.
Yes.
But best case scenario...
Yes.
Exile forever.
Yes.
at the North Pole. But, you know, like, apparently the North Pole, you can just walk there
Yeah.
in a weekend.
So we get to this diner. They show up at this diner. They order some food. There's a kind of running gag about how hungry Lois is all the time, which I thought I liked.
Yep. Incidentally, Margot Kidder, her weight bounces up and down. Did you notice?
It does. I was a bit worried, actually.
Yeah, I actually wrote in my notes, what is wrong with Margot Kidder?
Yeah.
What's happening is that we're seeing footage being shot 2 years apart.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And in the original, I've written, is Margot Kidder okay? Question mark. What we're seeing is, in the original footage from 77, she's one weight.
Okay.
And then in the reshoots in, in 79, she's much, much thinner.
Okay.
For whatever reason.
Okay.
I don't know. She famously sort of had mental health battles.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a factor or not, but if she were one weight the whole way through the film, it would be less jarring, I think.
Yeah. I noticed it early on. I didn't notice as much. Maybe I just got used to it or whatever. I wasn't looking for it as much.
Reeves changes shape as well, as he stacks on more muscle.
Yeah.
In between filming
Right.
as well. But I think it's less noticeable because she's just really sallow in the face.
Yeah.
Poor old Margot Kidder.
So they show up this diner, and this bully shows up, this truck driver, and the waitress is like, oh, this guy again, Mr. Wonderful again. She knows. This guy's a regular here.
He's a jerk and everyone's afraid of him.
He's a jerk. He sits down next to Lois. He starts sexually harassing her.
Yep.
Clark comes out. He'd stepped away to go to the bathroom, but he comes back. He's like, let's take this outside, buddy. And the guy beats him up. He punches him in the back of the head first. Yep. And knocks him through some glass, and Clark is bleeding, but he decides to try to fight the guy. The guy beats the crap out of him. This scene is actually shot really well with all the reaction shots from the other people.
It is.
Because they're horrified, and Clark is horrified that he's feeling pain and he's bleeding.
Yep.
Which he hasn't experienced before. And everybody else is like, whoa, something's wrong with that guy.
Yep.
And his reaction, and there's a lot of reaction shots. It works really well.
It is good. This is one of the better scenes.
Yeah.
Upsetting to watch.
Yes.
Because you know that this was the most powerful man who he'd never felt pain, probably hadn't felt pain since he was a child. Although he has all his powers as a child, so he's never felt pain in his life. And we knew that he was a champion of justice, and now he's not anything, right? Yeah. And it's hammered home with like a line from Lois, which is, you can read in more than one way, where Clark says, maybe I should hire a bodyguard. And Lois says, I don't want a bodyguard, I want the man I fell in love with.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? Does it mean, I just want you, I'm happy with you, Mr. Kent? Or does it mean, I want Superman back?
I think it means Kent.
Well, but it could mean either. It's an unsettling line.
Yeah. Because it's not until 5 seconds later that the waitress turns on the news, and we see the news about Zod, and Clark's like, oh shit, Zod, I've made a terrible mistake.
Yep.
Now, Ashton and I have both had the same reaction to this. He's only been human for one scene.
Yep.
In a different movie, if this didn't have so many plot elements going on, it would have been, I don't know, a good chunk of the movie where he was human.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
It actually, I did like in a sense I loved it too, because I loved how immediately
it became
he had a responsibility, and he gave up. Because somebody says, he sees the news, and he says, how long has this been going on? And he says, the waiter says, where have you been on a desert island? And it's so obvious, like, he's been sleeping with this woman.
Yeah.
He's been getting her flowers, having champagne, having dinner. He's been shirking his responsibilities on Earth. And I really liked when that guy said, where have you been on a desert island? Because it really hit home really hard, even though it's only been one scene.
That's right. Because I was thinking it all along. You know, we see interspersed with Clark pouring champagne, getting flowers, sleeping in a giant beanbag, and deciding that getting laid is more important than protecting the innocent.
Yeah.
We've seen the Phantom Zone villains fucking shit up.
Yes.
We're not allowed to forget it.
Yeah.
Even though he has.
Yeah.
And the whole time you're just like, this is contemptible, man.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you don't get that.
Yeah. Or as a kid, it's like, oh no, like the bad guys are there.
Yeah,
And he
wake
know.
up, Superman!
Yeah.
Why are you hanging
Save
out
us,
with
Superman.
girls?
Yes, absolutely. And he says, I have to go back.
Yep. And he hitchhikes to the North Pole.
He walks and hitchhikes to the Fortress of Solitude. Even after the hitchhiking, you see him walk. He's eating snow. as if he could somehow survive.
He's human.
He is human. He's not. When he was a
Physiologically
teenager, he walked up there fine. He had superpowers.
Well, he had superpowers, yeah.
That was fine. Now he's completely human with no powers. How do you
Whatever
walk?
he is, a depowered Kryptonian.
He doesn't even have a jacket.
No.
He doesn't have gloves. He doesn't have a hat. He's just walking in the North Pole.
You know, even if the Fortress of Solitude isn't exactly at the magnetic pole,
Yeah. Yes. Agreed.
it doesn't matter.
Try to walk for one day
In
through
the
the snow
Arctic,
with
yeah.
no gloves.
Yeah.
No hat. Crazy. Absolutely crazy.
Impossible.
Yeah.
It took a long time for human beings to get to the North Pole.
Yeah.
Or the South
Yeah.
Pole.
Yeah.
Because it's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Clark is a human being now. So forget, at least Lex Luthor had prepared as much as possible as he could prepare from prison. He had his snowmobile, his warm
Yes.
clothing,
Yes.
his hot
Exactly.
air balloon.
Yeah.
He'd laid the groundwork.
Yeah.
Fine. I didn't love it. You can't snowmobile to the North Pole. But,
Yes, we're supposed to believe this is just willpower, like...
but it doesn't matter. You can have all the willpower in the world, but it does not matter
No.
if you're a baseline human being, you cannot walk. What are you
No.
going to eat?
Yeah. He eats the snow. We
Where are you
we have
gonna
a shot
sleep?
of him eating snow.
Where do you sleep?
Yeah. No. It's just force of will. He gets back there, he screams out for his father, much like Kyle MacLachlan calling for his father in Dune. Please ring the bell.
Sleeper has awakened.
But the green crystal glows. It was not glowing, but in his kind of like calls out to him almost.
So this is the crystal that Lois had,
Yes.
and when the rest of the crystals blew up, they were all supposed to blow up, but the one that she dropped on the ground,
Yeah.
pretty carelessly,
Yeah.
has survived, because I guess it wasn't part of it wasn't
Yes.
connected.
And it's the main one. It's the one that like
It's the original.
that built the fortress in the first place.
According to... So here, we don't see him get his powers back. A baffling omission. But apparently...
No, because it's supposed to be a reveal. So they wouldn't show it. Of course they wouldn't show it.
Why wouldn't they show it?
Because
He was always... He's
it
there.
doesn't make sense. Look, we had this 3 weeks ago with Fantastic Four when the Thing got his powers back. You don't show the getting back of the powers. It doesn't make any sense. You just show the stripping.
Well, I mean, we know it was the machine in the Fantastic... I agree. But at least there was the machine. Here, he just picks up a green crystal. How's that green
Yeah.
crystal going to give him powers back? Apparently, in the original script, Jor-El is supposed to show up.
Oh.
In the quote-unquote. And I think in the Donna cut, he does.
Okay.
Although I don't want to talk too much about that. In that interview I mentioned before with Salkind, the junior Salkind, Ilya Salkind, he said in the original screenplay, Jor-El was supposed to literally reach out and touch Kal-El's extended index finger, like the Michelangelo painting.
Yeah.
What is it, The Creation of Adam?
Yeah.
And Salkind apparently said even that was too much. So apparently there's a limit.
Oh, jeez. Okay. Well, it would confuse the Jesus and Adam metaphors as well.
Yeah, they're not the same.
Yeah. So Lex arrives at the White House, one of the greatest scenes in cinema history, where he's trying to convince these Phantom Zone villains that he can help them and he can rule the world with them.
Yeah, he wants Australia.
He wants Australia, and a great line. This Lex is totally obsessed with real estate.
Yeah, he still wants...
By the way, this version of Lex is as a businessman, didn't exist in the comics. This was created by the movies, but then it came into the comics.
Yes.
The comics adapted this version of Lex.
Yes.
Where he became a businessman. And future
Very
film
80s.
versions were all he was a businessman.
He's always that now.
Yeah.
I think ever since the 80s,
He's never the super scientist anymore.
No.
Like he was in the comics. No. So he comes in there, he's like, well, I can give you the son of Jor-El. And
Zod's stunned.
the son
How
of
do you
Jor-El
know
here
that
on
name?
Earth. Yes.
And it's sort of been established, Zod's been in charge of the whole world for about 3 days. And he's already bored.
Where did we get that number from?
He says, okay, so it may not be 3 days.
Okay.
But we have some dialogue where Ursa tells him, you're the Lord of all you survey. And he says, as I was yesterday.
Oh.
And the day before.
Okay, I see.
And the day before that.
I see.
So
I
like
read
3
that
days.
line as
Yes.
his life in general.
Yes.
Including on Krypton.
He already bored. No,
Right,
he
right.
wasn't.
You're right. Of course, you're right.
And he's already bored.
You're 100% right. Yeah.
But finding out that Kal-El is on Earth, that fires him up.
Yeah.
So now we've moved. Now we got revenge story.
Yes. Now we can get
Zod wants revenge.
Yes.
He will not rest And now he starts really like Terence Stamp's performance up to this point has been fun and intense, but fairly understated. Now he starts chewing the scenery.
No, I would say, yeah, actually, maybe you're right.
Now it starts going. Now it's up to 11.
Yes.
So it's been at 10.
Yes.
Now it's up to 11. He's screaming and ranting. The son of Jor-El will kneel at my feet.
Yes.
I swear it.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So Lex says he can deliver them. In exchange, he wants Australia. They arrive at the Daily Planet, and they smash it up.
More just
Yes.
knocking down load-bearing beams.
We get that picture of Bill Cosby again. Again, not sure why it's there. They're like, but at the planet, they're like, where is Superman? Why has he run away? But suddenly, newspapers start blowing in the wind, and Superman appears.
General, care to step outside?
Yes, great line.
Yeah, it is.
Now we have the big street fight in Metropolis, where these villains are fighting each other. Some of it's kind of slow-mo, like when they do kicks and stuff, they're like on these harnesses and have to rotate very slowly to perform some of these moves. But it was absolutely epic, and I do believe it was the inspiration for Miracle Man number 15, where it's like, well, wait a second.
Really?
If you really push these four superpowered people fighting each other, it's going to be a lot worse than what we get in this kids movie. And I believe Miracle Man number 15 led to Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, where, as far as I can tell, 10 million people are dead, and Superman is making out with Lois Lane.
They've had to walk that back. You know, they've walked that back. Like in Dawn of Justice, I think they were. Was it Dawn of Justice? No, in Man of Steel. In Dawn of Justice, there's a specific line that says, "Those buildings are unoccupied."
Oh, no, there's a shot in Man of Steel where it is a wasteland, absolute wasteland.
Yeah.
And I think there's a chain that goes Superman to Miracle Man 15, Man of Steel.
I want to move that.
Yeah.
Although it's not a great chain. But it'd be.
There's this.
I didn't
this
like
fight's
the
actually
idea
great.
that Man of Steel was inspired by Miracle Man 15.
It seems really obvious to me. I think if a jock read Miracle Man 15 and made a movie, which is what Zack Snyder did,
Okay, that's better.
that's what you would get.
I like that spin better.
Yeah.
Ding ding.
I love this fight because there's lots of tiny details in here that the whole movie's full of tiny details that I love.
This is the first big superhero throwdown.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's wild.
And so there's this moment where, the first moment I love is where Superman rescues a baby in a baby carriage. When he flies away, he has a smile for the lady. She's like, thank you, Superman, he smiles. I love that kind of stuff in this movie.
Yep. There's,
I love the lines where Zod says, I've discovered his weakness. He cares about these people.
These people.
Like pets, Ursa says.
Yeah, something like that.
Yes, I suppose so. Sentimental idiot.
Yeah. People are getting thrown into... I think Zod gets thrown into a truck with Marlboro on the side.
A lot of product placement.
Product placement in the scene. Non gets thrown into a giant Coca-Cola.
Yes. Or vice versa. Yes.
Oh yeah, maybe it was Superman that got thrown into it. Yeah, it's just... There's a big scene where the people of Metropolis / New York see that Superman's gone down.
They think he's dead.
And they rally to his defense. And then there's a... This feels like it's about 10 minutes where the Phantom Zone criminals are sort of blowing their super breath.
It's too long, and I suspect it was directed by Lester, not Donner.
It was.
Because this is a lot like what we see in Superman 3 in terms of what the sight gags are like.
Yes.
So it's like a guy in a phone... Okay, so there's a superhero battle happening in the streets, and people are going about their business as usual. People are in the KFC, and they come out with some chicken, and then they're blown down the street.
You just didn't...
And there's a guy on the phone, in a phone booth, and he gets knocked over on its side, and you're still having a conversation.
So silly.
We're supposed to be laughing about this stuff. It just goes on and on and on.
This is what people... When people complain that the Lester version is silly, this is the kind of thing they're talking about.
Yes, but there's moments in here. There's a scene where Non and Ursa pick up a bus. And this moment is so burned into my mind where Superman is like, no, the people. Like, he's so freaked out that people are going to get hurt by them picking up an occupied bus. I love that split second so much. His distress at the possibility of these people getting hurt.
Yeah.
Yes, so there's a lot of... They think, as you mentioned, they think Superman is dead. The people revolt, a bit like, I feel like we saw this in some of the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah, there's a scene like this in the Spider-Man 2.
Yes.
Where he's collapsed on the train.
Yes, and they
Dr. Octopus, they say, you'll have to go through me.
Yeah, yeah.
And me, and me. And Dr. Octopus says, fine! And he just pushes to the side with his tentacles.
Yes.
That's the Sony Spider-Man universe, though. Or is it?
No. Yeah, it's Sony. Yeah.
Yes, but they're not. I don't think they're.
No, they're not in the universe.
So we could cover them.
I think we're going to get to them.
Oh yeah, Sam Raimi.
Yeah. Okay, so but Superman is not dead. He climbs out from wherever he'd been smashed into, and he
behind the bus.
He flies away, and the villains are like, "Oh, he's a coward."
Yep.
And they're like...
Also, there's a scene here where he reflects heat beams with a truck mirror.
Yes.
So Zod is trying to ignite the fuel tank of a large kind of semi-trailer, and it's taking a really long time.
Yeah.
And we get enough time for Superman to grab the mirror from the side of the truck and use it to reflect the heat beams back to... Okay, mirrors don't reflect heat.
Yeah.
It would have just melted the...
Yeah. There's lots of stuff like that in this movie.
It's just so goofy. I mean, a truck mirror maybe seems kind of big, I guess, if you're holding it in your hands.
Some piece of steel, maybe.
It just looks silly.
We don't know that it's really heat beam. It's some sort of ray beam that came out of his eyes. So he flies away. The villains are like, well, Lex is like, I know where he's going. I know where his house is. They take Lois as a hostage or for leverage.
Yeah.
They fly up there.
Okay, so what's Superman's plan here? He's flown to this... He has a plan.
His plan is to...
Depower them. But they don't... He doesn't know that they know where the... He knows Lois knows where this fortress is, I suppose.
Yeah.
But it's not Lois that tells them, it's Lex.
No.
He doesn't know that Lex has been
there. No.
Doesn't really make sense.
No.
In fact, it looks pretty cowardly, like he just ran away.
Yeah. So he flies up there. Now, they have a fight. They all arrive at the fortress. They have a big fight where a lot of random powers show up.
The cellophane S?
The cellophane S. So he pulls the S shield off his chest. There's still an S on his chest, but he pulls one off that's like a cellophane that wraps around Non and then dissolves.
Yep. Well, why? What does that do? Where did it come from? What kind of power is this?
Nope, never seen that before. The villains have rays that they shoot out of their fingers, finger beams.
What do these beams do? Superman catches it in his hand.
He blocks it with his hand, yeah.
And then they team up on him with their 3 beams. What are these beams doing?
Yeah, don't know.
Superman already has beams. Kryptonians already have beams that come out of their eyes.
That's right. We don't need the finger beams. They were. I think Lester here is looking for stunts to put in the climax of his movie, stuff we haven't seen before.
Well, it gets even crazier.
We get the teleporting. They start teleporting around. It's not explained as super speed, but they're just bouncing and also making multiple versions of it.
It seems like, first of all, it might be super speed. But then, it's not, because it turns out they're holograms. And not just holograms, but holograms that turn into statues.
Yes. Hologram that solidifies into a statue. Some of them just fade away if you try to touch them.
And others turn into rocks and collapse when you touch them.
That's right. And...
But what's the basis of this power?
Don't know, but Superman says, I used to play this game at school.
What school?
No, what school? You've forgotten what happened in the first movie. You've forgotten the origin of Superman.
What? Did Lester think that he went to school on Krypton?
Yep. Lester seems to be one of those guys that just doesn't understand science fiction or fantasy and is just like putting stuff together.
Continuity, what's that?
Yeah.
This is a movie about a space wizard. He can just do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
Who's right? Us or him?
Okay, so the villains have been threatening to kill Lex all the time. He's always coming up with an excuse. But now it seems like they're threatening him again, and Superman confides in him that chamber over there is a molecule chamber, is what he described it.
Molecules.
Molecule chamber. And he's like, if you trick them to go in there, it'll take away their powers. And Lex immediately turns on him and says to the villains, don't go in there, that's a molecule chamber, it'll take away your powers.
Yep.
And they're like, alright, Superman, go in there. And Superman hangs his head, he goes in there. And we get the flashing light, we get the red lights. We don't get all of the scary stuff that happened the first time.
Yeah, and they're completely unaware.
Even as a little kid, I was like, something's different here, because we didn't get all the scary stuff that really scared me an hour ago.
Yep. Superman seemed to really suffer
Yes.
when he was being depowered
Yes.
appropriately, right? Because he's giving up something very important
right.
for something that he thinks is
right.
even more important. But the Phantom Zone criminals don't go through any of that.
No, so we learned that he's switched the beam so it's safe on the inside, and anyone outside the chamber is going to have their be depowered.
Yep.
But they didn't go through all that existential crisis kind of stuff.
Which means maybe it was all in his head.
Maybe, but we didn't get the skin stripping and reforming either. Any
Must
of
have
that
all been
stuff.
in his head because it was an intensely personal experience.
Oh, so he wasn't literally reformed at the molecular level. I guess that's an excuse. Okay.
I'm not happy with my excuse. I'm not happy that I just explained this plot hole.
Yeah. Okay. So now Superman proceeds to murder the 3 Phantom Zone villains.
Yep.
As far as we can tell. Now.
No, he kills them. He straight up kills them.
No, he doesn't straight up kill them. So he drops them into these giant shafts, these giant pits. Are there little jails down there? We don't know. But
No, they're not.
there is a cut scene,
Yeah.
which I've seen on TV or in the Donner cut, where some police cars show up at the North Pole.
Yeah, it's in the Donner cut, yeah.
They show up at the Fortress of Solitude. I don't know how these police cars reach
Oh, you can
there.
hitchhike to the North Pole. So,
Okay,
like,
yes.
on a cop
At this
car
point, we've
drive
established that in this universe, you can just get there. So the cop cars show up and they drive away with the Phantom Zone villains.
Sure, but in the theatrical cut,
in the cut, they're dead.
Lois...
Much like Batman throwing all those villains off the belfry where the church bell was.
Yeah.
A bit like that.
This is murder.
Just very casual.
None kills himself, arguably. But Superman throws Zod into a wall where he falls to his death.
Yes.
And then Lois Lane punches Ursa.
Yeah.
She says, "You're a pain in the neck." Because
Yeah.
she's been holding her by the neck this whole time. Punches Ursa also into a hole. This is manslaughter at best.
Yeah.
Superman never kills. Forget that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's more, he abandons... I mean, there's practically a bus stop outside the Fortress of Solitude.
Yeah.
But, okay, we've established that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the film, Superman abandons Lex Luthor at the fortress.
Yeah, we get some ADR about, hey, give me a ride back or something like that, he says.
He just leaves him there.
He just
Well, they fly out. Just Lois and Superman fly out,
Yeah.
and Lex doesn't fly with
Yes,
them.
because we don't have the shot of the cops showing up at the fortress to arrest them. Yeah. By the way, the murderer, Zack Snyder must have saw this as a justification for Superman murdering Zod at the end of Man of Steel.
Where he breaks his neck.
His neck. It must have been.
Yeah.
And that's as stupid because there's nothing... He was worried that Zod was going to laser I-beam some people that could just move over to the side,
Just get out of the way.
So it was much like the dog rescuing the dog scene.
If you can move Zod's head enough to break his neck, you can move it enough so that his I-beams aren't pointing at these people, right?
So stupid.
It is stupid.
So stupid. Okay. Back at the Daily Planet. Now we have to unpack this relationship between Lois and Superman. She's like, now he's Superman again, so she can't be with him.
Why?
I guess because Lara said if you want to be with a mortal, you have to be immortal.
But why?
I'm not really sure. Do we have who's the guy that wrote Sex with Superman? Was that Larry Niven? Who was that?
It's called Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex.
Right. So maybe she'll die. I don't know.
Yeah, he'll blast her in half with his
Yeah.
ejaculation.
maybe I don't know. But
Superman's not willing to have a relationship without sex. So sorry.
But
I
like. There's things here I like. Like I like her feeling like she doesn't want to be jealous of the whole world because he's responsible for everybody.
She said, "I'm gonna be like that wife who's married to a doctor who's always going out on call and always having to share him with the whole world." And it's like, yes, but people are married to doctors.
Yes.
Are you saying?
I think Superman's on more than a doctor, maybe.
Sure.
On call.
But that analogy doesn't really work because doctors find love.
Yeah, look, it doesn't work, but does it work at any level of Superman? Any Superman comic? I don't know if it ever...
I think they get married in the 90s.
Of course they do, yes. But I mean, before that...
No,
I don't know that
because it's the end of the world. Well, it's the end of the story if Superman's identity is revealed.
Yeah.
That's the conceit we've bought into when we've started watching these movies.
Yeah.
So then it's magic kiss time.
Yeah. So he says, "What can I do?" She says, "Say you love me." He does not say "I love you," which would have been a nice thing to do. He could have told her that. It just gives her the magic kiss, which is the final new power of the movie.
Yep.
He kisses her, and it wipes her specific memories of...
It wipes whatever memories he needs for the status quo to come back.
Yes.
That's
Does she
very
remember about
particular.
Zod? Does she remember being at the fortress? We don't know. It's so specific.
Yep.
And weird. By the way, this is undone in Superman 5, The Magic Kiss. Everything up to here apparently happened, but not the kiss, because she does know he's Superman.
Yeah, because the
in
kiss
that
is
movie.
dumb, and
It's very dumb.
she can just keep his secret. She said she would. Why does
Yeah.
he need to do this?
Yes.
It's
yes,
awful.
that exactly.
She doesn't consent to it.
I guess because because of her heartbreak. It erases her heartbreak,
You know,
which is probably not fair.
yeah, she didn't consent to it. You can't take away a part of a person's psyche for your convenience, and it is for his convenience.
Yeah.
So that he can go back to the way things were. He can go back to living his life the way he wants without worrying that she's going to.
He knows that he can't give up being Superman. He knows he can never have her. Right?
Yeah.
So there's no point in he let her know he was Superman because he was going to give up his power.
Well, she found it out. Well, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tangled...
In the Donna cut, he sleeps with her before he gives up his powers.
I think I remember that.
Which I think is more mature.
Yes.
Because here the impression is, you can't get laid.
Yes.
Unless you give up your power. It's the Niven interpretation, right?
Yeah.
Whereas it's a choice he made after they'd been intimate.
Yeah.
In the Donna cut, which just seems a lot more grown up.
I
and
think
here
you're
it's almost like...
I think you're right.
Here it's almost like, well, you know, things didn't work out, so now I'm going to wipe your brain so things would go back to normal for me.
Yeah.
It's awful.
He goes back to the diner, he beats up the bully in a scene which I loved as a kid.
Yeah, I would have liked it as a kid too. As an adult, I think, why did you do this? I mean, this guy's a jerk, but this is...
I don't know. It's a button on that moment. It was really traumatizing when he got beat up. I was okay with it. There's kind of a nod to this, as I recall, in Man of Steel, where he wrecks this guy's truck, his livelihood.
Yeah, which is much worse.
For no reason. Like, what have you done to this guy?
Worse.
Why?
That guy now has no truck, and that's not good.
It was really bad. That movie's so fucking stupid. Oh.
Yeah, incidentally, Clark wrecks... We know that the owner of this diner has spent a lot of money fixing it up from the last time Clark handled a situation, in inverted commas. Now Clark does it again.
Yes, but he hands a wad of money to the guy.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah,
I guess
he covers it. He
that
says,
should
"This
cover the damage.
Sorry about the damage. This should cover it," or something like that. He does.
Does it? Yeah, I suppose. Does it?
It's a bit like.
Is there
You know what? It should have been.
Margin? Does he make any
what
profit?
should have been was that the diner was scheduled for demolition, and we get a thought balloon, a voiceover from Curt saying, "This diner is scheduled for demolition anyway, so it's okay if I beat the crap out of this guy inside it."
That's great.
That would have been the better solution, maybe.
I think, for me, I see this and I just think this is not what Superman is supposed to do with his power. Superman is supposed to be a paragon of morality.
Yes.
He's not supposed to take revenge.
Yes. But maybe I forgave it. Maybe I forgave it in comparison to Man of Steel. Maybe that was it.
Of course.
But then for the final shot of the movie, he flies up into the sky and he flies towards the camera and he smiles at us. And I'm like, thank you, Superman, for saving us.
He also says, and he flies. We've got a shot of him with the American flag.
Yeah, he goes back to the White House. Yes,
it's like he's flying with the American flag. We're like, what is this? And it turns out he has a cupola for the new roof of the White House that the Phantom Zone villains crashed through. He puts it back, and the president says, "Good to have you back, Superman." And he says, "I'm sorry I was away. I'll never let you down again."
Yeah.
And the very next thing he does is leave for 5 years.
If you could, yes, if you consider that, if that's the continuity you're following, that is true. But yes, he smiles with that great Christopher Reeve friendly smile,
fantastic.
And it's so lovely, and I was fine with that. Okay, it's trivia time.
Brilliant. All right, so I mentioned the budget already. 54 million.
Yep.
Allegedly, that's the official figure. In comparison to the $55 million budget of the first film. But again, how can we unentangle their budgets? I'm not sure. But that's the official figure. The official box office is $216.3 million. So,
whoa.
which is an enormous amount of money.
Okay.
Less than the first one made. The first one made $300 million.
Okay.
But it's still a very respectable profit.
Yeah.
And in fact, this film was considered a smash hit.
Yeah.
Obviously, it made a lot of money, and also the critical response was generally quite favourable. Very favourable.
Right.
On balance.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, people like Siskel and Ebert gave it, 4 stars.
I love this movie.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so Warner Brothers was the distributor. So Warner Brothers owned DC at this point.
Yes, they still do.
Good. And they were the distributor of this film for unrelated reasons.
Okay.
Because it's a kind of like a British production.
Right. Okay.
They ended up signing for both this film and the first film. They ended up signing Warner Brothers as the distributor, but apparently they're handled separately.
Bizarre.
Yeah. So even though Warner Brothers gets input through DC,
Yeah.
they had a different line. So they had kind of like 2 different lines.
Strange.
It's all very legal and all very tortuous and bizarre.
Yeah. But always, I mean, for a very long period, it was like Superman and Batman movies were getting made because they were owned by DC, and Marvel was floundering with like Howard the Duck, like trying to get a movie out, and they couldn't because they weren't owned by this parent company, right?
Yeah, sure. But when the Salkinds got the rights to Superman, the rights were very broad.
Yeah.
Basically, they were allowed to make Superman movies until like the year 2000.
Right.
And they had access to every character that had ever... This is before... So apparently Marvel had learnt the lesson... we've been talking about Fantastic Four, where it was very specific which characters they had access to in the Fantastic Four, right?
Right.
Whereas here, apparently they just had access to... The rights said they could have anyone that had ever appeared in Superman.
Right.
And by some interpretations, that could be virtually any DC character.
Yeah, right.
Everyone from Batman to Crypto the dog.
Bill Cosby.
Speaking of Warner Brothers, this film was not released simultaneously. It had a staggered release around the world.
Okay.
To maximise profits, Warner Brothers decided they would release it in the peak cinema-going period for each region.
Okay.
Which meant that this film had its world premiere on 19 cinemas in Australia.
Huh. Interesting.
On the 10th of December, 1980.
Okay.
And then like a week later in Europe.
Right.
But not until 6 months later in the US.
Whoa, that's
not until June.
Wow.
That meant that they needed to have a media blackout in the US.
Yeah, weird.
So that there wasn't...
How weird.
Yeah. Well, pre-internet, you could do it.
Yeah.
As if you had a tight control of kind of like the media.
Yeah.
You could do it. Now, of course, now impossible, right?
Yeah.
People would just be pirating it like mad. But yeah, no, it paid off. I mean, it had a big opening weekend in the US. In Australia, not so much. Although it did well. I think it made about $500,000. It's pretty good for 19 cinemas.
Okay. Yeah.
Merchandise.
Okay.
I imagine you own some of it.
I had some stickers. I had the movie book, which I got out last time. So I got this through Scholastic.
This movie book was in arm's reach of where we're sitting, by the way.
Yeah. I meant to get it ready and I didn't, but it didn't matter because I know exactly where it is. Exactly where this thing is. So this was... I remember I got this, I think, before Superman 2 had come out.
Okay.
And I made my dad read it to me. And my dad was very... He was tired of reading. It was a chore for him to have to sit and read with me. But I wanted him to read all the Superman 2 stuff, which I hadn't seen yet. He's like, let's wait until we see the movie. I was like, no, Dad, please read it. I remember begging him to read all the stuff. So I knew all this sort of trivia and stuff. And this also was a book that I would stare at all the time. There was a poster in the middle that I pulled out and put on my wall.
Lots of stills from the film. And
got stills and lots of...
Only the middle... pages are in colour.
Yeah, but it's got
it's cool.
Like pages from the comics and like it got all sorts of background stuff. It's only 50 pages or so. It's like a Scholastic kids book.
Amazing. I'm interested to hear that you got it before the film.
Yeah, and I remember there was also another version that came out for Superman 3, like an updated version, and I wanted it and somehow didn't. I don't remember what happened. I think my parents wouldn't.
It's very this looks like promotional. It's promotional, isn't it? Would you say?
Yeah. Well, it's a tie-in, but it was published by Scholastic. It's called The Great Superman Movie Book.
And then on the front it says like confidential close-ups.
Yes, fabulous
Fantastic
photo.
facts.
Yes, fabulous photo collection.
Very cool.
And a full color Superman pull-up poster for your wall, which I had pulled out and is long lost.
So I promise this is relevant. So when we did Batman, we talked about Batmania.
Yes.
And Batman was kind of like the film that really cemented merchandise as one way that your film could make money, a shitload of money before the movie even comes out. Because a lot of that Batman merchandise was on shelves before the movie came out. At this point in 1980, we weren't quite on that level, or for the 79 release. But nonetheless, Warner Brothers licensed 1,200 products.
Okay.
For these movies, these two movies.
Okay.
Including, but not limited to, belt buckles, underwear, watches, pillowcases, soap in the shape of a telephone booth, velour sweatshirts, expensive velour sweatshirts from Bloomingdale's, calendars, pop-up books, novelizations,
The Great Superman Movie Book.
And even a Superman dictionary for kids.
Okay.
And the thing about Superman merchandise, Superman merchandise was already really big.
Yeah.
And had been really big since the 40s, really.
Yeah.
It's one of the ways that made DC, people associated with DC millionaires and multi-millionaires, whereas famously
Siegel and Schuster
had nothing.
Yeah.
We talked about that in the first podcast. Yeah. They sold the rights for $130.
Yeah.
And in the 70s were broke.
Yeah, yeah.
Eventually, on the back of the success of this movie, people started... Well, you covered this in that podcast, but people started paying attention, and Warner Brothers generously gave them $20,000 a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a pension.
Yeah.
After... I mean, it made hundreds of millions of dollars. It's rough, man.
Yeah.
I promised to return to the cigarettes.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, now Lois is a chain smoker in this movie.
Yeah, she was a smoker in the first one.
She did smoke in the first one, but now we see that she smokes a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And we've got Marlboro signage.
Yes, I noticed that.
Throughout the movie. A big Marlboro billboard.
In fact, doesn't he check her for lung cancer in the first movie? He says, you really shouldn't smoke, and then he looks at her lungs and he says, you're alright for now, or something like that.
Yeah, he does. None of that in this one. That's because Philip Morris paid $40,000.
Holy shit. Okay.
Yep. To the Soul Kinds.
Advertised in a kids' movie.
Yep. That's right.
Okay.
Well.
That's that.
Yep. So, anti-tobacco advocates have preserved the contract.
Okay.
You can read it online.
Okay.
Or not the specific, but a letter outlining the terms of the contract that they've already signed.
Okay.
And this is the banality of evil right here. It's so anodyne, it just lines out exactly what page of the script.
Holy shit.
These advertisements have to appear in, which characters have to be on screen.
Okay.
It's all just something. It's very sinister how innocuous it is. How big the billboard has to be. It's all just outlined in this here. In such a manner is poison fed to children. And this is kind of like, if you forgive the pun, a smoking gun in the history of how cigarettes were sold to children. It's often mentioned as one of the nastiest and most egregious examples of product placement in exchange for cash.
Right. Well, it's funny, I never noticed it until this viewing of it. So, I've watched this, like I said, I didn't notice that ashtray, the funny ashtray shot, until this viewing of it. And I've probably seen this movie 10 times.
People take up, almost all people that pick up smoking pick it up in their teens.
Yeah.
And smokers have a tendency to die or quit. If you want to keep selling tobacco, you have to find a way to get children addicted to it. And this is one of the ones they did it.
Yeah.
Incidentally, in 1983, another cigarette company called Liggett Group paid $30,000 to have Eve cigarettes appear, which is a brand marketed to women, in a film called Supergirl.
Huh. I didn't notice the cigarettes in that one either.
No. I think her roommate smokes.
Oh.
Not, obviously not Supergirl herself.
Okay.
Yeah, Lucy. Despite, when this came to light, eventually it caused some outrage.
Right.
Apparently went all the way up to the US Congress, but nonetheless it was not until 1998 that tobacco companies agreed to stop doing this in films targeted at minors.
Huh. Okay.
That's pretty much all I have for trivia.
Okay, so it's voting time.
Yes.
So, my vote for this movie, I do love this movie based on the performances, the characters, Watching it on rewatches, you start to see the flaws. When you watch it really close, because you're recording a podcast, you really see all the flaws in it. But of course, it's not as good as the first one. But despite all that, I do still, and despite everything I've said, picking it apart, Hackman and Stamp and Christopher Reeve and Margot Kidder, everybody's just really so great in it. So it's a yay for me. It's still a yay.
Yep. I'm going to vote nay.
Okay.
There's stuff I love about it.
Yeah.
The Phantom Zone villains. The
Yeah.
Phantom Zone criminals I love.
Yeah.
I just want them to be on screen all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
It's not I feel like we're spending too much time on the love story between Clark and Lois Lane.
That's gotta be there to justify the losing of the powers. Otherwise, it's just the Phantom villains show up and there's nothing stopping Superman from getting... It's the movie.
I understand why it's got to be there. I just think it's too much. I think we spend too much time on it.
Yeah.
And it could have been less emphasis, I suppose, or perhaps another device.
Okay.
One that's less time consuming.
Okay.
Also, this film, as you said, has big flaws because of the circumstances under which it was made.
Yes.
That we've switched horses midstream, we've switched directors.
Yeah.
As a consequence of that, lots of the actors did not come back.
Yeah.
Lots of the and not just actors, but crew.
Right.
So last time when we spoke about 79, I mentioned the editor and the cinematographer, people that Donna felt should have been nominated for awards, but were ignored because of the genre ghetto of the time. You know, like the film editor whose name escapes me that worked on like Empire Strikes Back and films like that, who has since passed away. Though none of those guys came back. You know, instead we have whoever replaced them. You know, not to mention John Williams. I said I'd come back to John Williams. John Williams apparently spent 1 hour with Pierre Spengler.
Okay.
This guy that Donna hated, the producer, and said, "I can't work with this man."
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
In the interview with Ilya Salkind that I read on Superman homepage, Salkind tries to laugh it off and says, "I made the mistake of leaving Spengler alone with Williams."
Okay.
Well, that was a mistake you should have known, you shouldn't have made? What? Apparently this guy's so loathsome that Williams decides not to work with him like that? So, Hackman didn't come back.
Yeah.
Ned Beatty didn't come back.
Yeah.
Miss Tess, the actor, Valerie Perrine, who played Miss Tessmacher, doesn't come back.
Yeah.
That's why they're hardly in the film.
Yeah.
As I said, I love Gene Hackman's performance, but he's missing. And half the time when he's in it, it's a body double.
Yeah, I wouldn't say half the time. There's shots where it's obviously a body double in ADR, but he's there.
Anytime he's not in focus, it's probably. And
Yeah.
Can you imagine dubbing Hackman?
Yeah, I don't think it's that enough to detract from it.
Sure,
But here's what I'm gonna... Okay, go
One
ahead.
more thing.
Yeah.
Perhaps the thing that people bitch about this movie is tone.
Okay.
And I suppose, sure, there was plenty of laughs in Superman 1.
Yeah.
And some of the laughs in this film were things that Donner himself shot.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, one of the things I loved about the first film was the serious tone.
Yes.
What Donner called verisimilitude.
Yes.
The idea that what we're seeing is something new for a comic book movie. That it could be, you could believe a man could fly, right? That it could be real. We're seeing something that seems real. This film is so goofy at times, it doesn't feel like that anymore.
I do feel like there's bits in Superman 1, especially with Lex and Otis, that kind of slapstick stuff. It's there.
Yeah, I agree.
Look, all I'll say is...
I feel like there's a big tonal shift, and even Lester himself, I've got a quote from him, Donner was emphasising a kind of grandiose myth. There was a kind of epic quality which isn't in my nature. So my work really didn't embrace that. That's not me. That's his vision. I'm more quirky, and I play around with slightly more unexpected silliness. I think that's perfectly honest, but to me it's a step down, and so for me it's a nay.
I think... Okay, fine. I think you're going to regret your nay when we get to 3 and 4, because you're not going to be able to go lower. Because we only have 2. We have yay or nay, and you're going to be like, shit, I should have given Superman 2 a yay.
Sure.
Because Superman 3, everything you've just said is amped up, way, way up in 3 especially. 4 is a different kettle of fish, but all the goofbag jokes, Richard Pryor is a number 3.
Yeah, I know.
Hamming it up in a big way.
This is you see this, when you read about the film online, you'll see this, people will say, it seems silly, but boy, is it better than 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we'll climb that hill when we come to
Okay.
it.
We didn't talk about the comics.
It's no for me. These are stupid.
No, I would read these again.
Good.
These are yay for me.
All right, adaptation. What do you reckon?
I think this is a good adaptation of the comics. I think they've taken all those kernels. I think they've worked them into. I think they've turned the Phantom Zone villains into something that works. I like the way all those kind of elements are there in some form. Even the plot holes are there in some form. Even the solutions to those problems that don't quite work are there in some form in the movie. I do think it's a good adaptation of these comics.
I'm in two minds.
I think even the addition of powers, which is the most anti-comic thing about it. None of those powers are in the comics.
Well,
They used to add powers all the time. Here's super ventriloquism shows up. Now they keep those powers and they show up in later issues, but they would add them on there.
Yes,
It was
absolutely.
not the same from issue
Like
1.
you said before that Superman was forgetful.
Yes.
Like when he put, when he left that gun at the bottom of the sea that could have enlarged Kandor.
Yeah.
You might remember way back when I read a little excerpt from a friend of the show, Sean Baby's Super Friends article about Superman, where he said the biggest problem with Superman is his memory.
Yes.
That he always forgets he has powers because he has 100 powers and he's discovering new ones all the time. This is a guy that could kill you by looking at you or breathing on you because he has freezing breath and laser vision, and yet he'd often be tied up by the villains. Forget that he could look at them and kill them.
There would always be kryptonite involved in some form.
Well, sure, but yes, he making up crazy powers, that's consistent with the comics. There are other. I'm in two minds, so that's fine. Plot holes, goofy powers, secret identity above all.
Yeah, that's in
This is rock solid comic stuff. Then we have that's the past. Then we have the future. We've often said that a good adaptation is when stuff from the adaptation makes its way back into the material from which it is adapted.
Yeah.
Non-Ursa and Zod are all in post-Superman 2 Superman comics.
Yeah.
Especially Zod.
Yeah. Yeah, Zod has become a major villain.
Yep.
He used to be a nothing.
And he is Terence Stamp.
Yeah.
As well. Right. He's this version.
Yes.
So that's another point in its favour. On the other hand, my other, to go to the negative side, the nay side, the film's not doing anything really kind of clever, I feel. Especially when I compare it to it's tempting to always to go back and compare it to Superman 1, especially since they were shot at the same time. But with Superman 1, there was interesting things being done, not just with giving it a serious kind of realistic tone, but also in terms of that thematic strangeness regarding him as as a messianic figure.
Yeah.
That's kind of been lost,
Okay.
I think, in Superman 2. And there's nothing really...
But how could you include that religious theme in a sequel?
It doesn't have to have a religious theme specifically. It just has to do something creative and interesting.
Right.
And I feel like that it isn't... the idea that what he has to live without it... The idea that the moral question, is it correct to give up your powers and go and live with your girlfriend, doesn't really feel like something a paragon of morality should have to grapple with. Superman is... notwithstanding the fact that he beats up a trucker and kills the Kryptonian... kills the Phantom Zone villains, but his great moral quandary is... should I not save millions who I can in order to be with the woman I love?
Okay, but how does that fit into your rating of the adaptation?
It doesn't feel like a good moral question for Superman to be grappling with. I feel like there should be something a little more weighty and a little less selfish.
Oh, I see what
That's
you mean.
all. I don't know what should replace it, but I'm just saying that I feel like to be a great...
It's not epic enough.
Yes. Thank you. Took the words out of my mouth, yeah.
Okay, so are you rating it yay or nay on adaptation?
I'm going to come down on nay.
Okay, I don't know that we've ever had a triple yay, triple nay before. This might be the first time.
Amazing! Amazing! Oh, I love it. What a triumph. I'm very happy with that.
Okay. Please like, rate, review, subscribe. Please send us comments through our Facebook or Instagram or Blue Sky. All the links are in the show notes. You can also send us an email directly. That link is also in the show notes. please join our Patreon at patreon.com/comicbookmovieoblivion, all one word, to help us keep the lights on with hosting fees and books and DVDs and things like that. Next week, we will do Asterix and Obelix versus Caesar.
Amazing.
From 1999. And I think there are 5 of those movies, 5 live-action Asterix movies, over a course of 25 years, so they might be in different continuities, quote-unquote. I believe they're all based on specific Asterix books, though.
Groovy.
So we will be doing them all, unlike some of these other things where we'll just do, like, the first one and skip the others. I think we will end up covering them all. And this will also be our Ides of March special. It should be right on time for that.
Very good. Well done.